Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
It was early spring outside. The snow was just beginning to melt, but all the puddles were already in streams, around which the children were running merrily, shouting and laughing. They all had paper boats, and some were floating real wooden boats made by their fathers or grandfathers on the weekend. Near a large tree, from which large drops of melting snow were falling, stood a tall for her age girl of 8. She looked longingly in front of her. She didn't have a boat. Her mom was at work, so she couldn't make one, and the girl had no one else, not even friends. They had recently moved to a new house, and she hadn't had time to get to know anyone, but she loved to go out. But it's hard to have fun when everyone is playing and laughing, and no one wants you. Molly sighed and pouted her lips in resentment. On a bench a little away from the brooks and trees sat a short old man with gray tangled hair and a gray-brown cotton jacket. On his feet were very shabby boots that must have been cold. He looked at the children with a smile, then shifted his gaze to the girl and lowered his head sadly. After a few seconds, some idea came to the old man's mind. He jumped up from the bench and rushed somewhere towards the house. He knocked on the door, and a stout, tall woman with a ladle in her hands came out onto the porch. She asked the old man something menacingly, but when he explained what he wanted, she shook her head and went into the house. After a few seconds, she returned with a piece of paper. The old man nodded gratefully and returned to his bench. He began to roll the paper into the shape of a ship. He was doing it very strangely, in a special way, and even managed to attract the girl's attention. It should be recognized that this old man was one of those who, with his kindness and charm, could attract people to his side. He was helped by everyone to whom he turned for help, whether he managed to relieve them, or he could choose such people who would not refuse help. No one knew, but everyone helped, and he never refused if he was asked for anything. Christina, who lived in a house on the edge of the street, was an old and infirm old woman. She was so weak that sometimes she couldn't carry heavy bags home, but Gary, the old man, was always there to help. Christina often brought cutlets or soup to his semblance of a house in an abandoned school building. Molly watched the old man with interest as he rolled up the ship. When he finally finished, he smiled kindly at the girl and beckoned her over to him. Molly's mom was always telling her not to approach strangers because they could hurt her or take her away from her mom, and Molly had always obeyed her mother's instructions, but not now. The old man's good-natured smile, curiosity, and desire to play with everyone made her head for the bench. The old man silently handed the girl a small snow-white ship made of thick paper, almost cardboard. It was unusual, not like the others, big with sails and a mast. Molly did not know that such a thing could be made from an ordinary piece of paper. Her eyes lit up, and she looked at the old man as if he were the wizard Goodwin from the story she had read last weekend. The old man nodded at the creek, near where the children were playing, and smiled again. The smile lit up Molly's face, and she ran off to play with the others, as if this ship was a ticket to a world of friendship and children's games. Contrary to her wish, the girl did not put the ship on the water. She felt sorry for it. She ran with the boys, refused to exchange with the boys who offered their handicrafts. Molly had gotten attention and a willingness to play with her. She didn't need more. She turned to see that old man again, but he wasn't there. The bench was empty. Molly looked sadly at the ship and ran home. She would definitely keep it, no other way, because it was a gift from a real wizard. At home, Molly waited impatiently for her mother, who had to come from work in the evening, about 5 o'clock. The girl was so impatient to tell about the ship that she forgot to eat and did not even turn on her favorite cartoons, which went only on Saturdays and only at this time. She kept running to the window to see her mother's red coat or her blue beret, but her mother was delayed somewhere. When the clock hand went past 5, Molly began to worry. She would not leave the window. Tears almost came to her eyes. She remembered that Daddy had also failed to show up once, and she was afraid that it would happen again. But luckily, this time her fears were in vain. Molly's mom, Jennifer, came a half hour after the promised time. Molly threw herself on her neck, not even allowing her to put the bags on the floor and take off her shoes. "What's wrong?" Jennifer exclaimed. "I thought you weren't coming as Daddy." Almost sobbing, the girl said, "Sweetie." Jennifer hugged her daughter and squatted down. Molly, like most children, was often dramatic, but she was quite resilient. Her grudges for the rest of her life usually ended after a series of her favorite cartoons or after a scoop of ice cream bought especially for her. Now she wiped away her tears with her sleeve and smiled broadly. "Look what I have!" the girl shouted and ran off to her room. Jennifer smiled and shook her head, trying to get her boots off before her daughter arrived. Molly came running in just a few seconds later and held out a snow-white craft to her mother. Jennifer took it in her hands and bowed her head. She scrutinized it carefully and came across an embossed inscription. It was almost illegible, but there it was. The woman awed and backed away, not knowing what to say. "Honey, where did you get it?" Molly shrugged her shoulders. "The old man on the bench, he made it for me." "What did he look like?" Molly wondered. She wasn't good at describing people, so she could only name clothes. Jennifer handed her daughter the grocery bags and asked her to sort through them, and went to her room. She sat down tiredly on her bed and sighed. She couldn't believe her eyes and still thought she had imagined it. Jennifer reached into her locker and pulled out an old shoebox from there. She carefully removed the lid with trembling fingers and exhaled noisily. She hadn't had to open the cherished box in years. It was filled with junk, as anyone who opened a shoebox would say. But for Jennifer, it was the only thing that bound her to her quiet parents. Or rather, so she thought. Jennifer's mom, Susan, was indeed dead, having died of cancer when the girl was 13. Her father, on the other hand, had gone missing 3 years earlier. At 13, Jennifer was left alone, the benefit of being raised by an aunt, Jenna's father's sister. She was younger than her brother, unmarried, and belonged to the type of people who believed that nothing could be better than freedom. So she never restricted her niece in anything. However, her upbringing too, she was not engaged, preferring to write memoirs, go to modeling shoots, and celebrate contracts with her lovers, which were at least 6 for the time that Jennifer lived with her. Except only the last one had lingered for 2 years, along with her son Michael. Jenna had never treated her niece with warmth or anything like that. She just didn't care for the girl. Occasionally she would walk into her room, look at Jennifer aloofly, nod her thoughts, and leave. At 18, she subtly began to hint that it was time for her niece to do the honors, or she would be too long in someone else's house. From then on, Jennifer started living on her own. She had been working part-time before, saving money for the future, and now she began to live on her own. 16 years ago, a 13-year-old girl sat on a narrow bed with flowered sheets. She was holding a ship made of paper. It had masts and sails and did not look at all like the ones children played with on the street. She looked sadly at the ship, her hand trembling. "What are you doing with this toy? You are not 5 years old." Rolling her eyes, asked Jenna, who leaned against the door and looked at her niece. She was a tall and thin woman with long curly hair and a very pretty face. The woman preferred to wear expensive brand-name clothes and put on good makeup. Jennifer, as a child, often heard from her mother that it was unknown where she got the money for all this from. She never had a normal job, occasionally selling her graphomaniacal writings to publishers and receiving modest money for photo shoots as a model. "My dad made me this." Coping with her emotions, the girl replied and hid the ship in a small shoebox that stood next to her. When the lid was in place, Jennifer clutched the box to her chest. "Your father hasn't been with you for 3 years now. There's no telling where he is." Jenna shrugged her shoulders. "It's about time you started living your own life. Even though your mother, it didn't work out." Jennifer looked at her aunt with hatred and clenched her teeth. A storm of emotions rose at her because of mentioning her mother in such a negative way. The girl realized that she shouldn't quarrel with her aunt, with whom she would have to live for a long time, but she wasn't going to listen to such statements about her mother. "This is the memory of him. Only he made ships like this, I know, because no one else had them. He'd leave his signature by crumpling the sheet in a special way. Would you like me to show you?" Jenna raised her hands, shook her head, dismissed me from looking at the old paper. John was always scribbling something when he had nothing to do and sticking it to others. The look Jennifer directed at her aunt startled the woman. She chose to remove herself from the small room, leaving the girl alone with her thoughts. There could be no mistake. It was indeed the same ship. The side was crumpled and stamped with the same illegible letters as on the old yellowed piece of paper. Jennifer folded the 2 ships and closed her eyes. "What if I'm just making this up to myself?" The woman shook her head. For over 19 years, nothing had been heard from her father. It was as if he had fallen through the earth, and now, after all this time, Jennifer was seeing the same ship. What if it was just a coincidence? But Jennifer didn't believe in coincidence. She believed in fate. Maybe it was her desire to have at least one loving relative, except for her daughter, of course. But she was too young to confide her worries to her. Jennifer had never been an optimist, quite the opposite. Life didn't give her moments to believe in miracles or happy endings. First her father disappeared, then her mother died, and she was taken in by a self-obsessed aunt. At 19, it seemed that life was finally starting to get better when a young girl was in law school, she got a boyfriend, and they started living together. Then it seemed that everything would always be fine. But fate, or evil doom, never left Jennifer, only gave her a little respite. And now, years later, in her life again happened grief, the usual familiar grief. The woman was glad she had her daughter, but she was very afraid for her. Molly, in essence, was all Jennifer had left. And the tiny chance that her father was still alive had lit a long-lost hope in Jennifer's long-lost soul into a faint flame. "Molly?" shouted the woman, removing the box. She had never shown it to anyone, ever, after that day at Jenna's house. It seemed to be something private and intimate, something to be hidden and not given to anyone. "Honey, come here." Molly ran into the room, her face smeared with flour, certainly not escaping her mother's scrutinizing gaze. Jennifer looked at her daughter with that maternal look that made it impossible to lie. Lowering her eyes, Molly confessed, "I dropped the flour." "The whole packet?" Jennifer gasped, remembering that she had wanted to make cheesecakes this morning. "Why'd you get soaked?" "I thought I could clean it up before you got home." "Kids," the mother thought and shook her head. For a second the heavy thoughts disappeared from her head, and she looked at her daughter with a smile. Molly was the only ray of light in her life, and she wasn't ready to lose it either. "Okay, let's deal with the flour. You better tell me, where was that old man who made you the boat?" Molly sighed and tried to explain the place. Jennifer had grown up in this town, so she knew the streets and nooks and crannies well, but even she had a hard time understanding the place from her daughter's clumsy and somewhat awkward description. The garages next to the mini village? Jennifer shrieked when she finally realized. Molly shrugged. If that's not them, I've completely forgotten the town. Molly didn't understand half of what her mother was saying, so she just nodded and pulled her by the hand into the kitchen. Come on, I'm hungry. Oh, you've been hungry all day. Will you have rice and a cutlet? The girl nodded and rushed into the kitchen. But let's get the flour out of the way first. Jennifer grinned. A heavy sigh sounded on the cool spring street, close to a small settlement. Or rather, it was not really a settlement, but a part of the city where private houses were preserved. When the center and most of the districts were given for the construction of high-rise buildings, the inhabitants of this part of the city refused, and there remained a settlement of private houses. It was very small, but because of the heavy traffic and the large amount of trees, it was frequented by teenagers in the evenings and children during the day. Jennifer had no idea how her 8-year-old daughter had found the settlement when it was quite a long way from their apartment. The place greeted the woman with familiar fresh air and a view that hadn't changed at all. It was worth saying in the 10 years she had been out of town, the township hadn't changed the most. If in the city there were new stores, buildings, schools, and kindergartens, here stood the old grocery store, where probably still worked a tall, full Clara, who never tied her blue apron. Jennifer and her friends often ran behind the garages or sat on the village's shriveled playground. Besides, there were a lot of abandoned houses here, just a teenager's paradise. There were streams and puddles everywhere, but Jennifer remembered the way to the garages. She knew she wasn't likely to find anything there, but it was worth a try. Then she intended to ask around. In a place like this, everyone knew each other. Really? Jennifer grinned. The garages hadn't changed at all, except a little more dreary than they had been 10 years ago, and they were still standing close together. There was a path in the middle that teenagers ran around on, and one garage had an old 9-wheeler on it. No one knew how it had gotten there, but it had been there since before Jennifer had moved in with her aunt. Out of the corner of her eye, Jennifer could see the bench where the old man was sitting, according to Molly's stories, and in the distance there was an old oak tree, its branches spreading out for many meters, where the girl was standing. Jennifer looked around more carefully, hoping to find some hint of the old man who had made the boat. "Girl, you shouldn't stand where cars drive." A loud, very sonorous male voice sounded behind her. Jennifer turned indignantly toward the man and opened her mouth to say what she thought, but she failed. "Michael, you?" "How?" Standing in front of the woman was her long-time and not the most pleasant acquaintance. He could be categorized as the type of memory you don't really want to remember. Tall, blonde, and very pompous. Oh gods, how much Jennifer wanted him gone like her father had once been, without a trace. It had been her ultimate dream at 16. To meet him now was a complete surprise to the thoughtful woman. "I live here, but how did you end up here? That's the question." The man grinned. Michael was a year older than Jennifer, but had been in the same grade as her because of his father's many moves. He was in the military. A year after Susan, Jennifer's mom, died, Jenna had gotten together with Michael's dad, and the boy had moved in with them. Or rather, he moved in with Jennifer, because he lived the next 2.5 years with her in the same room. It had been a bloody, awful 2.5 years. Jennifer preferred never to remember them. 13 years ago, a tall, blonde-haired guy flies into the room and throws his backpack right on the floor. It's light, hardly any textbooks in it, but it hits the leg of a girl who's sitting at her desk trying to do her homework. It's worth saying, Jennifer has always studied hard, tried to get good grades, but lately, because of having a named roommate, she moved out to study, so she had to do her homework when no one was in the apartment. Michael liked to hang out after school with his buddies. How many times do I have to ask you not to throw things in the room? The girl asked angrily, not turning around. She had already started looking for her old headphones to isolate herself from Michael's chatter. Yes, it was his favorite thing to do, talking while Jennifer was doing her homework. He pissed her off all the time. This is my room, too, Prickle, and you need to stop worrying about order like this apartment is yours. Jennifer couldn't take it anymore and turned to face the guy. You know, no matter where you are, throwing things on the floor, talking loudly all night, is unacceptable anywhere. Michael grinned and tossed a tattered tennis ball from one hand to the other. You're too right, Petite. We're 9 months apart. The girl mouthed offensively and went back to her algebra homework. The headphones were finally plugged in, and Jennifer could no longer hear Michael's annoying, mosquito-like voice. Not long after that day, Jennifer lost her headphones. More correctly, they were ruined by Michael, who was tired of the girl ignoring his words. Jennifer even cried then. And now, many years later, Jennifer stood in the garages and looked at that same annoying and nasty face. Of course, they weren't children anymore, and Jennifer had long since become a mother herself, but childhood resentments don't just go away. That made her feel a kind of nasty suffocation on her soul, as if an encounter had occurred that she didn't want. In spite of her feelings, however, Jennifer smiled. I've recently moved here. Michael shifted his gloves into another pocket and grinned. I thought you had an apartment downtown, didn't you? I sold it. Jennifer replied briefly, and no, I don't want to talk about what happened. The man grinned, the familiar dimples appearing on his face. He was standing quite far away, but even from that distance Jennifer could see the familiar light in his eyes. Do you want to come in? I don't live far from here. Michael asked, or do you have something to do? Next time I will, but now I have 44 minutes left before my shift starts, and I have to find the homeless man the 8-year-old kid described. Michael's eyes widened as he looked at the woman in surprise and grinned again. He didn't seem to understand anything, but he was insanely curious. Who was the homeless guy? Jennifer didn't know if she should answer Michael, because she never liked him and only did nasty things to him, but she judiciously described the situation briefly. She was moved to this act by the realization that without the help of a local, to find the old man will be very difficult. Besides, Michael, like her, was an adult. It's foolish to lose a chance to find a possible father because of childhood resentments. So you're looking for the man who made your daughter's boat. I won't ask why, but I can't help you yet. I just bought a garage here, so I don't know anything or anybody. But I'll be sure to ask around and see if anyone knows anything. Jennifer nodded gratefully. She hadn't expected to be so lucky. It was the first time fate had taken pity on her, it seemed. Considering it was Michael, though. Give me the number? Said Michael, and Jennifer looked at him uncomprehendingly. I'll call you if I can find it, or do you want me to pigeonhole you? No, said a hurt Jennifer. There he was, the real Michael, sarcastic and sarcastic. Too bad. The man smiled wryly. In that case, I would have had to get your address. Jennifer held back the urge to reply and handed Michael a business card. He took it and whistled. Juvenile Inspector, Senior Lieutenant Jones Jennifer. Not bad. I never thought you'd be on the police force. I was a specialist in another field, and they only took me here to educate kids. I never thought I'd be doing that. I didn't see myself as a school teacher either. The man laughed and punched the number into his phone. Jennifer opened her eyes wide and gasped. What? No way? You were dumb as a cork. How could you be? Michael rolled his eyes and shook his head. It's been 13 years and you're still as cocky and self-important as ever. Who's to say? Okay, well, if you hear anything, give me a call. Jennifer said hurriedly and left. She didn't say goodbye or anything. The thoughts and feelings of her childhood came flooding back. Yes, someone will probably say that it is strange. They are almost 30 years old. What childhood resentments? But for Jennifer, immersed in her own problems, after the death of her mother and the disappearance of her father, it was the last straw. A spitting aunt, a strange man in the apartment, and him, the man who occupied the girl's room and made her worry almost every day. Because of him, she almost lost her gold medal and had a fight with her aunt, so much so that she threatened to get rid of her niece. It wasn't just a childish grudge, it was something you can't forget. Baby, stay with Aunt Nancy. She'll look after you. Jennifer whispered softly in her daughter's ear. But where are you going so late? Jennifer sighed. She couldn't tell her daughter the truth while it was still early. To work. I got called into work. Molly nodded and hugged her mother. Nancy, I'll pick her up in the morning then so I don't wake you up if anything happens, okay? The tall, thin woman, Jennifer's neighbor, nodded. It wasn't the first time she had stayed with a girl whose mother worked all the time. Raising a child alone, there are a lot of downsides. Jennifer left Nancy's apartment and went about her business. She got into the old car that once belonged to her husband and drove off. At 12:30 at night, the phone rang. On the other side was the slightly agitated voice of a man asking for an urgent call to the abandoned school building. It was Michael. Oh gods! How Jennifer was angry. She just didn't understand what he wanted from her at almost midnight, but he was asking to come urgently, so she sent her daughter to a neighbor's house and went to the school building herself. She'd have to remember where it was. Night roads were a nightmare for the woman. She hated going anywhere in the dark. The fear that still lingered constantly plagued her, but the strange joking messages that came from Michael kept Jennifer going. She just wanted to remember a couple of skills from her self-defense classes and smash his smug nose in for upsetting her daughter and making Jennifer herself drive off halfway through the night, unknowingly to wherever. How angry she was, but there was nothing she could do but clutch the steering wheel with all her might and rid the dumb jokes and the messages from Michael out of the corner of her eye. Jennifer wouldn't be surprised if she arrived at the school building and he was waiting for her with a smile on his face and said he was just bored. The car had to be parked far away from her destination, simply for the reason that the woman didn't know what kind of soil was there. Considering it was spring, there could be both snow and knee-deep water, and that was a best-case scenario. Jennifer climbed out of the car and turned on her flashlight, a good thing she had known to grab one before she left. Trying to remember the way to the abandoned school, she trudged through the mud and snow. Good thing she'd worn shoes that wouldn't get wet. Despite her excellent grades, Jennifer always liked to have fun with her friends. She never lagged behind her girlfriends in relationships, also ran behind the garages, and came home after midnight, drunk. True, it was once or twice. No more. The aunt was to blame. While the other girls sprayed a ton of perfume on themselves and chewed a whole pack of mint gum to cover up the smell of cigarettes and booze, Jennifer had no reason to do that. Jenna didn't care about her. She was immersed in herself and her memoirs. Jennifer wanted to listen to moralizing like the rest of them, wanted to hide the smell and try to get out of the house after midnight, but she couldn't. Jenna herself sometimes asked her why Jennifer didn't drink, invited the Beaumont to her parties, and sometimes suggested her acquaintances as suitors. Because of this, Jennifer would often leave the house or sit with her headphones on. At that time, she and her friends would raid every abandoned house in the neighborhood. Of course, the huge school building didn't go unnoticed. Jennifer's memory did not fail her, and she recognized the exact location of the school. It was a huge, sometimes crumbling building, where once they wanted to make a factory, then a sewing shop, and then they gave up. 10 years ago, the building had been a wreck, and now it seemed to be hanging on by a thread. Jennifer sighed and walked inside. She still couldn't figure out what Michael was doing in this place and why he wanted Jennifer. Once inside, the woman heard the annoying creaking sound the wooden floor made. It was like a sieve, so badly gnawed by mice. There was trash, cigarette butts, and bottles lying everywhere. Jennifer pulled out her cell phone and asked Michael where he was. In response, from somewhere overhead, Michael dedicated the phone. "Tell me why you pulled me out of bed in, Michael?" "Michael?" Jennifer broke into a run, but the man's warning shout stopped her. Michael was hanging from a hole in the floor on the second floor. Apparently, he had fallen through it. He somehow kept his balance and even managed to hold his phone. "The floor is very flimsy. You climb up, you could fall through it yourself," Michael explained, dedicating himself to the floor. Jennifer nodded. She was well aware of that herself. "Why didn't you call the emergency services? You figured that since you got me in here, you'd be the one to get me out." An exasperated sigh echoed throughout the building. "The guys told me about a local homeless guy who lives at the school. They say he walks around, helps everyone, and they give him food and clothes. Are you sure it's him?" Jennifer asked excitedly, and then hesitated. "Okay, I get it. We'll talk about it later. For now, we need to figure out how to get you out. Maybe the emergency services?" Michael didn't have time to answer. The board beneath him began to make a sickening creaking sound. Sure, the height wasn't very high. He'd probably survived the fall, but it wasn't just the height. The first floor was full of beams, metal objects, and such. He fell on them. No ambulance would help. Jennifer awed and threw herself up the stairs. For a second, she was seized by memories she would rather not remember. Of that very day. She couldn't hear Michael screaming. She could only hear the damn boards that were creaking, crunching, and generally making too many noises that just kept the woman from concentrating. She realized the rescue service wasn't going to make it in time. Remembering the lessons of rescuing drowning people, Jennifer flopped to the floor as soon as she heard a creak beneath her. She prayed to God that she wouldn't fall. An image of a daughter who might be alone came to mind, but then another, darker and gloomier Jennifer crawled harder. Carefully pulling off her belt, Jennifer tossed one end to Michael. He tossed his phone back to the ladder and picked up the end of the belt. Jennifer grabbed some kind of beam with her other hand and began to pull. "Don't fly off after me," Michael warned. "I'm not going to." Jennifer parried and pulled again. Michael began to crawl out of the hole, but it was eerily slow, and the floor beneath them buckled harder and harder. The man was apparently stuck, thanks to the thick jacket that helped him not fall, but it was also preventing him from getting out. Jennifer still managed to pull Michael out of his trap. She was sweating and her arm was aching as the floor beneath the man. He slowly crawled towards the flimsy staircase. Jennifer descended to the first floor and sighed, shaking off her clothes and stretching her jacket. "You're insane," Michael pronounced and leaned against the wall. When one frame last year caught, their pirouettes had to do more pirouettes. The woman grinned. A second after she said that, a beam fell a couple of centimeters from where Michael was, fell to the first floor, and broke in two with a crash, and both Jennifer and Michael stood with their eyes wide open. About time. Michael said and exhaled. It could have been me. The angry look the woman threw at the boy was unmatched. For a second, it seemed that Michael would have chosen to go back. Why did you call me instead of the emergency services? Are you sick of living, you idiot? Are you out of your mind? Shouted Jennifer, approaching the man. You're an idiot and a moron. Are you scared for me? Michael asked incredulously. Jennifer was half silent and leaned against the icy stone wall, tears coming to her eyes, but she held back as she always did. I'm losing everyone, she answered hoarsely, and lately it seems like it's my curse. I've lost my mother, my father, my husband. I buried my mother not in front of my children as a grown woman, but when I was 13. I didn't understand what had happened or how it was possible. My father had left my life even earlier, starting a series of these events. I was 10. I didn't even have time to memorize what he looked like. If it wasn't for pictures, I wouldn't have known. And I buried my husband, being not a gray-haired old lady and with hands trembling from old age, but with a child in my arms, with a 7-year-old girl who to this day does not understand why Daddy left her. And Daddy, at the last second of his life, called me, not the emergency services, not the ambulance, but me. A single traitorous tear rolled out of Jennifer's eye, but she brushed it away so quickly that Michael didn't notice. He'd been in an accident. The car had flipped over, warped. It was impossible to get out from inside. He realized this, so he called me and apologized for everything. I was at work and I was interviewing a witness. I was angry that he interrupted me. Then I got a voicemail from him and I wanted to open it, but I got a call from the ambulance. He was driving in the dark late at night and he sent a video of him saying goodbye to his daughter. Jennifer covered her face with her hands and breathed heavily. She couldn't understand why she was saying all this, especially since Michael, truth be told, didn't really care who to tell anymore. In the 8 months that Mason had been gone, Jennifer had never, ever told anyone about her pain. That's why I was scared for you, because I won't suffer another death, much less one caused by me. Michael put his hand on Jennifer's shoulder. I'm sorry, I really am. It was stupid, coming here alone, calling you in. Jennifer raised her eyes to the man and shook her head. I'm just glad you're alive. I'm glad everything turned out okay. Wait. Jennifer's discerning gaze noticed movement in the darkness. It was as if someone was standing there listening. The woman snatched the flashlight from Michael's hands and pointed it into the darkness. A short man with a beard and mustache, wearing an old hat, a fleece jacket, and old boots was looking at her. Jennifer recognized him, just as Molly had described him. Dad? About her father, Jennifer didn't remember much. He was short, shorter than Susan, and even shorter than Jenna. Dad had a tattoo on his forearm and a large scar behind his ear. Jennifer didn't know where he was from, but she remembered her father telling more and more stories about his origins. At first she had believed, eventually she realized she was being lied to. Now an old man with gray hair, a sad, frightened look stood in front of Jennifer, and she couldn't understand at all. Was this her father or not? She took a step forward, but Michael grabbed her arm. Father, what are you talking about? Jennifer waved the man away and walked toward the old man with slow and cautious steps. She was afraid of scaring him. Good evening. My name is Jennifer. And you are? The old man smiled, revealing yellow teeth. They call me Gary. Your father's name was John, wasn't it? Michael asked with his usual sneer. Jennifer rolled her eyes and chose not to answer. Don't you recognize me? I realize it's been 19 years, but 19? The old man asked. so I only remember those years. I didn't count, of course, but about 20 years ago, I woke up in another city in the snow. I didn't remember anything. Gary lowered his head and began to speak hoarsely, as if remembering something he disliked very much. Jennifer listened intently, trying to look at the unfamiliar features of his face. I lived there for a few years, and then I came to this wonderful town by chance. The people here are very kind, not unlike the people in the place where I woke up. They feed me, sing to me, even give me clothes, and it's not a bad place to live. It's chilly in winter, of course, but I've gotten used to it. Shocked at the face and total incomprehension, Jennifer looked at the old man in front of her. She listened to him and she was getting scared. It was as if what he was telling her had happened to her personally. It was so horrible that she took a few slow steps back and leaned against the wall again. Michael touched her shoulder again and nodded, letting her know he was close by. "So you don't remember anything that happened before you woke up in that town?" asked Michael, giving Jennifer time to take a breath. The old man shook his head. "Do you have a tattoo of a ship on your forearm?" Jennifer asked. Gary blurted out a smile as he looked at the girl and rolled up the sleeve of the jacket that was wide to him. "Here it is, right here. Ships, you know, I've always liked them. They're beautiful, you have to admit. It's a pity we don't have a sea to look at this splendor." The air stuck in Jennifer's lungs and wouldn't come out. She looked helplessly at Michael and nodded. The man looked at the old man strangely. There was distrust and suspicion in his gaze. And the crescent-shaped scar behind his ear? Gary shrugged. "I haven't had to look in a mirror in 20 years, ma'am." The old man smacked his lips. Michael approached him and asked him to take off his hat. Behind his ear, there was indeed a big, thick scar like a crescent moon. The man turned to Jennifer and nodded. She couldn't hold back a sigh. Her knees shook so hard it felt like the ground was about to go out from under her feet, and her hands couldn't grasp the phone in her pocket. Someone had texted, however. It didn't care at all right now. Jennifer reached in and pulled out her phone, and from under the case she pulled out an old, tattered picture of her father and mother. They were smiling happily together and looking at the camera. Carefully, Jennifer held out the photo to Michael, who showed it to the old man, dedicating it with a flashlight. "Do you recognize it?" Gary, as usual, shrugged his shoulders. "Not the man, but the woman. She's beautiful. I think I've even dreamed about her sometimes." "Yeah, that's her. I couldn't figure out where I'd seen her, but she comes to me often, talking heresy. No wonder. The cold makes you dream." This is a picture of my parents, Susan and John. 19 years ago, my father went missing. He was short with a tattoo of a ship on his forearm and a scar behind his ear. He made paper ships and gave them away like you gave my daughter's ship. The old man listened to Jennifer in silence, not daring to speak a word against it. On his wrinkled and overgrown face, there was a storm of emotions, from fright to hope. It seemed that he was about to cry. "Do you think I am your father, ma'am?" "Yes," Jennifer answered clearly. "Why didn't you say you were looking for your father?" Michael hissed almost in Jennifer's face. They had talked Gary, or John, into having Michael over to their house for the night and then going to the hospital the next day. Admittedly, it wasn't an option that Michael liked very much, his apartment having been turned into a bed and breakfast. "I wasn't sure." Jennifer shrugged and walked over to the sink to pour water. "I couldn't tell you that maybe my dad was a homeless guy who gave the kids paper boats. I thought I was crazy, and besides, you're not the one to tell. Is it okay to bring him to my house? First of all, you suggested it. Second of all, it's not okay to bring him to my house." Molly would come over in the morning and find a homeless guy smelling like garbage on the couch. Michael nodded. Okay, Jennifer, I get. I have a former neurologist who works at Central Hospital. I'll call in the morning and see what can be done. Yeah, well, you call me. I'll try to get there early. There was a loud sigh. Michael rolled his eyes expressively. Where are you going at 2:00 in the morning? Stay. I've got a great bed and a folding chair. You don't have the girl alone, do you? Jennifer nodded her head. She was very tired and did not even try to refuse Michael's offer. In the few hours she had spent in the place, the hatred and bad memories had faded away somewhere. Maybe it was due to fatigue, or maybe Jennifer finally realized that they were no longer children. Despite the tiredness and even detachment, neither Jennifer nor Michael wanted to sleep. The man made the bed and laid out the couch. At first he tried to walk quietly around his own apartment, but then he realized that Gary was very difficult to wake. It wasn't that surprising, though. He slept in an abandoned building next door to alcoholics. They hardly behaved quietly at night. Jennifer made tea for two. The man came in and plopped tiredly on a bar stool. So what? Why that Dr. the X? Jennifer smiled and sipped her green tea. It should be made clear that Jennifer liked to get off topic with herself. She hated being the center of attention, the reason being that she was afraid. Being always in her aunt's house, more of an appendix to the apartment than a member of it, Jennifer transferred this behavior to the rest of her life. She had almost no friends. Those couple of colleagues from work and former classmates stayed in the neighboring town, where the woman lived for the last 10 years. She didn't make any acquaintances in the new city, and admittedly, she didn't want to. So, for example, with Nancy, Jennifer met by accident, having mixed up the doors of the apartment. In the house where Molly and Jennifer live, not all apartments have a number, because the house was not built so long ago, and not even all the apartments have not yet sold. Those who have already settled in have put numbers on their doors, but Jennifer and Nancy, who have just moved in, have not had time to do so. Late at night, after socializing with one not very polite teenager who had been drinking, Jennifer was coming home and got the wrong apartment door. She banged on Nancy's door for 20 minutes before she called the police. It took the precinct officer a long time to sort out what had happened. Michael grinned and shook his head. Jennifer noticed that he was doing that a little too often lately. Do you care about that? Jennifer shrugged and took another sip of her tea. It was hot and flowed pleasantly through her body. Only now it was clear how tired, cold, and scared she was. It was a bad match. Jennifer laughed. Who better than me to know that it's almost impossible to get along with you? Michael smiled. But that phrase is almost always an excuse. So what happened? Did you cheat on her? No, of course not. The man brushed it off. It's just that she wanted children. All her life she dreamed of a lavish wedding and a family, and I was 22. I'd just gotten back from the army and admittedly wasn't going to have kids for the next couple of years. Of course, we tried to live together, to stop fighting, but in the end she left. Michael smiled sadly and sipped his tea. No sugar. Remember, it felt good. It's hard to forget, I used to run into the kitchen and make you tea 5 times a day because you were lazy. Maybe I liked you taking care of me. No, you just liked messing with me. Jennifer grinned, leaning back against the wall. While Michael was gone, she had time to look around the apartment a little and was generally surprised. Despite the outside clutter, it was clean. The one-bedroom apartment resembled the one Jennifer had lived in with Jenna. A large room, a living room, and a small bedroom. The kitchen was surprisingly done up in very nice modern colors, with a tall table and a few bar stools. It wasn't hard to tell that the man lived here alone, though. There was one pan on the stove, one plate and fork in the sink, and one cup on the countertop. Jennifer had to work hard to find the other cup. So what's your ex-girlfriend's name? I figured you just don't want to talk about your dad, right? Okay, I'll play along. Her name was Mary, and it is. She's a lovely girl, a great neurologist, and probably a good wife, and she's also a mother. She had a son a few years ago, and surprisingly, I became his godfather. No way! I always thought it was hard to keep good relationships with exes. How would I know, though? My husband was my only partner, and he died. How tragic and pathetic. He died and I stayed. It's weird to start a new one. Do you have someone in mind? Isn't there a young English teacher in the school? Michael grimaced. Wendy? She's still working. Jennifer stepped forward and opened her eyes in surprise. No way. She's 90? 82 turned 82 at the beginning of the year. Gods, she's still telling stories about what it was like in England in '56. Jennifer couldn't stop laughing. It seemed like someone had jammed the on button. I can't understand how you got to school. Laughing back, Jennifer said, I could never associate you with a teacher. Other than a felon, did you ever associate me with anyone at all? With a smile at the corner of his lips, Michael asked. The silence was more eloquent than any phrase. Jennifer had never really seen Michael as a good person, never thought he would become anything more than a class bully. There was a time when there was no work at all. His father had finally drank himself into oblivion, started to lose his mind. Yes, Michael was shifting a mug of tea from hand to hand. There was nothing to live on, and my neighbor worked at the school as a vice principal. She retroactively enrolled me in some pedagogical courses, and in September, she got me a job as a teacher. Hodabich had just retired. They called Hodabich an old history teacher who wore a long beard and was bald. Surprisingly, I liked it. The salary, of course, is not great, but you can live. I graduated as a history teacher, and now I have 2 jobs and classroom management. Jennifer and Michael talked a little more about other things, about work, family, and the past, though they mentioned the past only in passing, trying not to talk about how they felt about each other. Jennifer, for the first time in years, closed the gestalt of resentment over what she thought was a spoiled childhood. Thank you, the woman said as she and Michael went to bed. The man gave her a perplexed look for keeping the conversation going and keeping me out of it. He didn't let me think about what was going on with me and my father. You're welcome. Michael replied simply and succinctly. I've always done that. I'm not used to it. What are you talking about? Jennifer asked, confused. When we lived at Aunt Jenna's house, it happened a lot. She'd say something to you, and you'd get caught up in the words, the thoughts. It was obvious you couldn't handle the flow of thoughts and nonsense in your head. Is that why you were talking nonsense? Were you just trying to distract me from thinking? Michael shrugged. Sometimes I just like to piss you off, he said, and went into the bedroom, where he went to sleep in a small and hardly comfortable chair, leaving Jennifer alone with her thoughts. She couldn't believe it. She was really stuck on what she had been told. Jennifer spent long periods of time thinking about problems and solutions, and was aware of the problem, but she could never think that Michael noticed it. However, they had lived in the same room for several years. It would be strange not to notice it. We'll have to do a lot of tests, of course, MRIs, blood tests, and so on. Plus, it's important to get him at least out of the state he's in right now. Nervously, Mary turned around to the door of room number 8, where Gary was lying. Since he doesn't have any identification, my hands are tied. If the story Michael told me is true, You should start recovering your papers immediately so we can begin treatment. Mary was a petite blonde with square glasses, a round face, and dimpled cheeks. She smiled at everyone and was polite, also very excited about Michael's arrival. She seemed to really care for him. Only Jennifer couldn't tell in what way she cared for him. "Thank you, Mary. But if he hasn't had memories for 20 years, can they come back?" Mary put her head down into the clipboard. 20 years is a long time, very long. Usually patients recover quickly with care, but your father has signs of frostbite, signs of beatings. He also drank and probably smoked, and he ate leftovers, which obviously didn't improve the situation. Also, for memories to come back, you need familiar surroundings, familiar people, and he was living in an abandoned school, and hardly anyone was trying to help him. I can't say for sure, but the chances are slim to none. We'll do what we can, but I can't promise anything, especially not until he has an ID. Jennifer covered her face with her hand and shook her head. She didn't know what to do or how to be. The situation was getting worse and worse by the second. "Thank you, Mary." Michael smiled and walked away with Mary. When he returned, Jennifer looked sadly at the room where her father was lying. The orderlies had shaved him and cleaned him up. Jennifer had brought new clothes. Now the woman was sure that this old man, her father, was short with blue eyes, a scar, and a tattoo. She had found him, except he didn't remember anything, and it was awful. "Jennifer, I've been thinking about the files. We can't recover them yet," Jennifer said with a heavy heart. Her words were soaked with grief and heaviness. Dad had a business, an apartment, money, and he'd disappeared too suddenly, and he was in a foreign city. Mom had said he was away on a business trip when he disappeared. He flew away, but he couldn't come back, and I think there's a reason for that. He's clearly been helped to forget his life. If we recover the documents and his status, those involved will probably be very unhappy. Michael nodded tiredly and leaned against the cold wall, adjusting the white robe draped over his shoulders. "It's been 20 years. Do you really think anyone still cares? I've been a police officer for 7 years, and I've seen so much brutality. People are sometimes willing to remember things that happened decades ago, and if it involves money, they never forget." "Yeah, I get it. Then you and I need to find out who's responsible for what happened as soon as possible. Otherwise, we won't be able to cure your father. Thank you for helping me and not going against my better judgment." "You're welcome." Michael chuckled. "I've never been against you." Immediately, memories of 12 years ago came to his mind. "What made you think you could yell at her? What makes you think she's to blame for your troubles?" shouted Michael in the face of Jenna, who stood nonchalantly with a glass of wine in the kitchen and slowly chewed expensive cheese. "She's already lived here longer than I thought she would, so she can't live on my money. It's hard work. She doesn't realize that." "Really? And what kind of labor do you do?" Michael asked snidely, squinting his eyes. "Do you type a sentence a day? Or maybe you sleep with another man? Why are you looking at me like that? I know about your lovers and that you're cheating on my father. So go and tell him," whispered Jenna. "You can't. Maybe because your daddy is an alcoholic and he's about to be fired from his job. Oh, and you won't even have a place to live. So don't cross me, puppy, you hear me?" Jenna smiled and waved her hand, and a large purple mug with some writing on it tumbled to the floor. "No," shouted Michael. "Oh, Michael, how could you break Jennifer's favorite mug?" the woman asked in a deliberately loud voice. Jennifer flew into the kitchen and saw the purple shards with the guy standing next to it. Michael sighed and gave Jenna a long look. These were his last days in this apartment, because soon this woman would kick him and his father out. He realized that, But even more, he realized that he couldn't change his mind, otherwise he would be on the street. Michael was sitting at home when Jennifer called and asked him to come over. He was on sick leave, and when he heard about Jennifer's problems, he realized that he would have to take a mini vacation. Mary was happy to help open the sick leave. To summarize Michael, he is a very kind person. Yes, in high school and even in college, he never shone with excessive discipline and obedience. And what a sin to say, in the army too, more than once he was caught in the boorishness of his superiors. However, with time, it passed, and he began to take everything easier. He never refused to help anyone, but at the same time he was not particularly appreciated in the teaching staff. He often ridiculed other teachers, taking the side of the students, realizing perfectly well that he had once been the same. Of course, no one could fire him. He did not violate any rules, but good relations could not be built. The once popular boy has turned into a man who rarely leaves the house. Most of his friends left for other cities, and those who remained have families. Michael rarely went on vacation, devoting most of his time to work. Jennifer became a ray of light in his boring and ordinary life. He even enjoyed going to abandoned houses and trying to find Jennifer's father. Michael got in his car and drove to the address. He didn't know what Jennifer had in mind there, but he didn't care. Talking to her gave him pleasure. He was no longer thinking about how to make it through the weekend. His head was filled with other thoughts. The door to the apartment was open. "Michael, you?" "Come in," shouted a female voice from the far room. The man made his way there and saw a large desk piled with folders, next to which stood a laptop covered in pictures. "What kind of archive summary is this?" Michael grinned and threw his backpack on the couch. "I asked a friend from the police to send me all the documents from my father's missing persons case." "How did he get them so fast?" "Wait, you drove to another city overnight to get them. Jennifer, have you lost your mind? What about the daughter?" "She was with Nancy." Jennifer waved it off and walked over to the stack of files. "Let's see everything. You're crazy, don't you think?" Michael asked, approaching the table. "I need to find the culprit, or my father won't be able to go back to normal." "Yeah. Let's just hurry up, shall we? You can take care of the laptop. There's a file with all of Dad's biography, his phone calls, possessions, and everything. An acquaintance did it." "An acquaintance? I'm getting scared. We worked with him before he moved away." "He's got access to the database, so he's been a big help." "Come on, the sooner we start, the sooner we're done. By the way, Molly's gonna be here soon. I gotta figure out what to tell her." A few hours later, the front door slammed and Molly came running into the room. She was happy and cheerful, obviously wanting to tell her mother something. But when she saw the strange man, she was embarrassed. "Hello," she said quietly. Michael smiled and waved. Jennifer took her daughter to the kitchen. She was not there for a long time, so the man decided not to waste time. He continued to leaf through the files. His gaze stopped on the largest file marked by the author of the list. The man opened it and began to read slowly and thoughtfully. With each line, he was surprised more and more. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. Jennifer came back in and quietly closed the door. She was really tired. She had already gone to bed. Good thing tomorrow was a day off. No homework to do. Where was she up late? At a friend's. Did you find something? What do you know about your father's business? Jennifer shrugged. I was 10. I wasn't really interested in it then. And when I was, there was no one to ask. Did you know why you and your mother didn't get the business? Yeah, they weren't married, so my mom's last name is Clark, and we didn't get my grandmother's 4-bedroom apartment. Not for that reason, there's another. Listen carefully. When opening your father's firm, there was a condition that the shares cannot be inherited in the family line. That is, when one of the partners dies or his withdrawal from the company, all shares go to the remaining partners of the firm. Is this legal? Yes, but it's rare. I suspect your father didn't think much of family when he started the firm. He and Mom got together later. But that's not all. Do you know how many partners there were? Jennifer shook her head and climbed onto the couch with her feet up. 4. Your father, Wilson, Parker, and Smith. Do you know how many are left now? 1 Parker, you think? Wait. 3 years before your dad went missing, Wilson died, heart attack at 41. That early? That's weird and more than that. The thing is, in the will he left, your father inherited the stock. But it's possible, under the bylaws, he had no right to transfer the stock to outsiders, but he transferred it to a partner. And your father got a controlling interest and the ability to run the firm pretty much on his own. But why would Wilson do that? The boat my father made for Molly had a sign on it that's on my boat. Wilson James. I don't remember much about my father, but I do know that my father fell in love with the sea when he met a friend of his, and everything in the house connected to the sea was connected to that friend. I couldn't remember his name, but I think it was Wilson. So he left a will to his father. Perhaps he knew or felt something. But that's not all. 5 years after your father went missing, Smith died of an accident. 5 years, that's the time after which a person is declared dead. Jennifer said thoughtfully, and so passes by law the firm, the remaining partners. And Parker, to get the full package, gets rid of the second partner and remains the sole owner of the firm. The woman whispered, "So you think my father was eliminated to get the inheritance?" "Yes, I suspect that Parker and Smith conspired to get the 50% of the firm that your father had. How did this go unnoticed? Didn't it become suspicious to anyone?" Jennifer asked incomprehensively to herself, rather than to Michael. Money decides everything. You know who lives and who doesn't. The only thing that confuses me is the fact that your father is alive. Wilson and Smith are dead, and your father isn't. And that's easy. I think those who wanted to get rid of my father just hit him and threw him in some quarry. I don't know, but he survived, and luckily he lost his memory. It's scary to realize that. Michael confessed and prostrated himself. "Do you have any coffee?" Jennifer nodded and got up from the couch, her eyes a little hazy. She wasn't looking around. Her eyes were focused on one point. "Are you okay?" Michael asked gently. "So is there coffee?" A few minutes later, she was already standing with a coffee pot and brewing coffee. "Aren't you busy tomorrow?" "Why don't you sit with Molly? I'm going to go into town and visit Parker. I want to ask him something." Michael, who had been sitting at the table before, jumped up and in 2 steps was next to Jennifer. "Are you out of your mind? We assumed a minute ago that he was responsible for 2 people being dead and 120 years without memory, and you decide to go straight to him and claim you know he's a criminal." "Don't yell," Jennifer said tiredly, and lowered her gaze to Michael's hands that held her by the shoulders. She could feel his warmth and his strong grip. "Let me go, or the coffee will be on the floor in a few seconds." Slowly lowering her gaze to her hands, Michael shuffled all the way back. He did it unknowingly. "Are you worried?" Jennifer asked, not demanding an answer. "I've worked with personalities like that, so you don't have to worry about my safety." "I'll go with you," the man said firmly. His confident gaze looked directly at Jennifer. "No arguments. Yeah, I get it. Why are you bothering with me and my problems?" Jennifer asked as they sat down at the table and began to drink coffee. Michael was taken aback and looked at the woman uncomprehendingly. "Well, when I met you, the negative emotions that I experienced as a child flared up in my soul. It's childish, I know. Well, haven't you ever had that?" A quiet chuckle escaped Michael's lips, and he shook his head. "No. Maybe it's because I've never felt negative about you." Jennifer gasped. "What do you mean? You were always building a sneak attack." "Yeah, you said you talked nonsense when you didn't want me to dwell on my thoughts, but that wasn't always the case. I mean, you broke the mug my friends gave me, you broke my headphones, you made fun of me at school, and even blew off boys I dated. You were ruining my life." Jennifer spoke slowly, trying to control the emotions that had suddenly flared up. "Remember the new headphones for my birthday?" "Yes, that was the only gift from Aunt Jenna in all the years." "Why are you looking at me like that?" "No. Wasn't that a gift from her?" Michael grinned. He squinted at the woman, trying to figure out how someone so smart and savvy could be so stupid at times. "The guys and I worked part-time during the summer, and I used the money to buy them. I didn't have enough to buy them, though. I had to borrow some from my father. It was his stash in case of a hangover. He gave me a hell of a beating." Jennifer looked at the man confused. She gently took his hand and tilted her head. "Why?" "You needed them so you wouldn't listen to me. I saw how worried you were about them. I thought you hated me, and you did. I liked you, Jennifer, and I was a silly boy who expressed sympathy through. You understand. Trite, huh?" Jennifer stared incomprehensively in front of her. In an instant her world had been turned upside down. She could sense that something was wrong, but could never quite figure out what. Coping with her emotions, the woman jumped up from the table and announced, "It's decided. We're going into town tomorrow. Jennifer, darling, is that you? Were you about 13 when I last saw you?" asked Kevin Parker, an older man in an expensive suit. He jumped up from his chair as soon as he realized who had come to see him. Michael and Jennifer eyed the man warily, not understanding why he was so welcoming to them. He took them to the local cafeteria and ordered a few not-so-cheap meals himself. "Don't worry, I'm paying. After all, this firm was built by your father's labor and sweat, so it's a shame you couldn't find him. It was you who paid for 8 years to find him." Asked Michael, and Jennifer looked at him shocked. "Yes, I had hoped to find something, but he just disappeared into thin air. All your partners have disappeared strangely, don't you think?" "Uh-oh. I recognize my father's grip." Kevin grinned and smiled sadly. "Yes, it was. I honestly could never believe it was an accident. First James, then John, then Jack. One after another. For 6 years, I only took the garbage out with the guards. I was afraid I'd get the same fate. Weren't you the one who set up that account?" Jennifer asked snidely. "No, I had no reason to. At least Jack's death. After your father went missing, I got the controlling interest, not Jack. Well, I mean, he split it between us, but I got 51%. But what's 100 better? Young man, you've probably never run a big firm on your own. Believe me, it's not that easy. I was going to give some of my shares to Jack to do the main management, and Jack knew about it, along with some lawyers who were drawing up the contract. And then Jack died by accident, and there was definitely an accident here. 2 other workers died on that construction site. There was a safety violation. The site was just shut down. It's all in Jack's file, so I had nothing to do with it." Kevin smiled sadly and sipped water from his glass. "Besides, I had nothing to do with John's disappearance. I had no idea what time he was going home. Only Jack knew his flight time. Jennifer looked at Michael with confusion. If Kevin was to be believed, their version was crumbling before their eyes. And Jack Smith, how had he behaved in the years since John had disappeared? Michael asked gently. He was always calling someone and nervous. I was sure he'd just gotten himself a woman. You could hear in his voice that he was calling a woman, and that was just normal for him. He was always very jumpy and restless. They say that's why he died. You have to stay calm on a construction site. Jennifer and Michael asked Kevin a couple more questions and left. Already in the car, they looked at each other confused. You don't think it's him? Not only did he spend 8 years paying for the search, but he also erected a huge monument to your father. I read in the files he was actually going to give 10% of the shares to Smith, which would have made him the leader. I don't think he just changed his mind and decided to take him out. And he couldn't have been involved in Wilson's death because he was in Israel for over 6 months for treatment, said Michael and looked up from his laptop. How do you know all this? I wrote to the very person you know on your behalf, and he sent me the information on Parker and Smith. Jennifer snatched the laptop out of Michael's hands and took a deep breath. Who gave you permission? You didn't think I'd let you go talk to an alleged criminal, did you? Jennifer turned away from Michael, muttering something quietly under her breath. But Michael could see the edge of a smile on the woman's face. I can't get over the fact that Smith was calling someone all the time. Who was it? 20 years ago, not everyone had a cell phone, and most people called from landlines, which means that somewhere could have saved the number of that lady. Unless, of course, there's still some of Smith's stuff somewhere. Michael concluded. Jennifer grinned and started the car. I read something too. I can't believe you got into the house. Michael hissed and sneezed. Jennifer drove them to the house where Smith once lived. Because he had no one, the house was left vacant and was just another abandoned building. Nobody actually lives here, so I don't see anything wrong with that. You ripped the boards off the windows with a tire iron and climbed in. Michael objected. Oh, it's nothing. We'll write it off to the teenagers. She shrugged her shoulders and walked on, shining a flashlight on her way. Here, shouted Michael. Jennifer walked over and saw the phone with the phone book next to it. How will we know which number we need? The woman shrugged and opened the dusty old book. Michael and Jennifer sneezed at the dust rising. So many years had passed after all. The book flipped through very quickly. Pages skipped until Jennifer saw a number written in red pen. Judging by the spread of the book, it was the page that had been opened the most, and the number had been circled several times in pencil. It wasn't signed, Michael noticed. It doesn't need to be, Jennifer said sadly. I know it by heart. They walked outside in a terrible mood, not knowing how to react to the news. Michael looked directly into Jennifer's eyes. He moved closer to her and kissed her. Jennifer was taken aback. What are you doing? You just broke into the house, found the culprit, well, almost, and probably helped your dad. You're awesome, you know that. You're not what I thought you were either. Jennifer confessed and blushed. Is this the first time in your life you've ever admitted you were wrong? Michael grinned, and Jennifer punched him painfully in the shoulder. You can't make me change my mind. Jennifer smiled imperceptibly. Jenna, is that you? A tall man in black clothing asked, holding out his ID card in front of him. Did you know Smith Jack? Asked the investigator to Jenna when she was at the police station. No. The woman replied hysterically. Your phone number was found in his address book, and there are witnesses who saw you together. So what? He was my lover. Jenna stuck her head up high. Yes, and also the mastermind behind the attack on your brother. He was the only one who knew when he was going home. John was attacked near the train station. An attack? Screamed Jenna. Are you out of your mind? Why would I hurt my own brother? Your mother's 4-bedroom apartment. Clear and concise, the investigator replied. You were up to your neck in debt that year. You had a loan. Yes, and I suspect not only to banks were owed, and immediately after receiving the inheritance in 6 months, you put the apartment for sale, and it was very quickly bought, which suggests that the buyer was found early. You paid off the debt, got rid of your brother, whose not small bank account went to you and his daughter, but since she was small, her mother put her money aside. And after Susan died, you got the leftovers. That's where you got the money for the Beaumont parties, Jenna, isn't it? The investigator asked snidely. Your niece has provided all the evidence that will help me put you away for a long time, as well as solve a 20-year-old case. So you can look for a lawyer, Jenna. You will definitely need one. The investigator was an old friend of Jennifer's. She had heard the entire conversation, thanks to the recorded phone. They listened to the tapes along with Michael, the man holding Jennifer's hand. You win. He smiled. We did, corrected Jennifer and squeezed Michael's hand harder. 3 years later, in front of the 3-story house, a large truck with a transportation sign stopped. 2 uniformed men got out of the truck and walked toward the house. They had keys. An older Mazda parked next to the truck, from which a blonde-haired man with a large bag on his shoulder got out. He looked around the area and opened the back door. A tall girl, about 11 years old, stepped out. She was smiling cheerfully and looking around, hoping to spot something interesting. She was holding a large paper boat. A short, bald old man with a beard got out of the passenger seat. He shouted something to the porters. Where's Jennifer? John asked Michael in a husky voice. Was she supposed to get here before us? Michael shrugged and pulled out his cell phone to dial Jennifer's number. She's probably hanging out with the criminals again. Such nice weather, she's working again. The old man complained. Nature was in full bloom. May was in full bloom. The smell of lilacs everywhere. The sun was shining so brightly that it seemed as if summer had already arrived. The trees were covered with little leaves, birds were singing on all sides, and the pond behind the house glistened in the sun. It really was grace, not weather, but Jennifer was at work again. She had been spending too much time there lately. That was Michael's opinion. Uncle Michael, look. Molly shouted and pointed to the road, where a police car with flashing lights was coming almost at full speed. About 100 meters from the 3-story house, she turned off her lights and began to slow down. The police Ford stopped in front of Michael. Jennifer jumped out of the back seat and waved to the driver and his partner. Thanks, guys, I'll owe you one. Good luck. Jennifer turned back to her family and was met with shocked looks. Why, you actually took my car, so I had to improvise. Where have you been? Michael asked. Were you going to miss the housewarming party? Jennifer rolled her eyes and walked toward the house. She was in a great mood, and even the nagging of her favorite person wouldn't ruin this beautiful day. For the first time in years, she felt at home. In an unfinished building, where they had just brought the sealed furniture, but this place was truly her own. Her whole family would gather under one roof, and for the first time in a long time, the woman felt happy. By the way, were you supposed to be at work too? Jennifer remarked snidely, showing the movers where to carry the big couch. It was your class that put on the Metallica concert near the principal's house. You got a call, but you didn't answer. I don't take work numbers on weekends. Michael muttered and wondered what kind of reprimand he'd get on Monday when he got back to his favorite class. The head teacher had told him not to take those slackers, but how could he refuse them? It was almost impossible. Oh, he'd probably lose his bonus. Although, it would seem, what's he got to do with it? End of the year guys are out for their last free year. Why touch them? Snapping her fingers in front of Michael's eyes, Jennifer chuckled and walked into the house. These blackouts often happened when the man was thinking about something. It had been especially so in the last year. If someone had told Jennifer 15 years ago about what Michael would be thinking, she would have twisted her finger at her temple. Molly ran into the house first and immediately rushed to the second floor, where she chose the largest and most beautiful room. True, there was nothing special about it yet, but Grandpa already had a plan to please his granddaughter. John had not recovered all of his memory, but he had definitely gotten some of it back. He couldn't testify at the trial against his sister because the doctors wouldn't give him permission. However, the prosecutor still referred to his memories. However, and without his help, Jenna was sentenced to 11 years in a general security colony, and all the money and the apartment returned to the owner. It is worth recognizing that Mary turned out to be a good doctor. The first successes in the treatment of John appeared after a couple of months, and 6 months later he already remembered his daughter. A year later, he remembered almost all the events of the last 30 years of his life. However, it was very difficult to fully recover his memory. Jennifer has never been able to get from her father's memories of how he met her mother. Yes, and much that was before the birth of his daughter, he did not remember. However, that didn't make him any less loved. Molly almost immediately got used to her grandfather, spent a lot of time with him, and often asked for help. John taught his granddaughter how to make ships out of paper and was very happy to have a family again. He recalled with a sad smile the years he spent on the streets. Michael also became friends with his father-in-law, although it must be admitted that for a long time he could not get used to him. His grouchiness and slight arrogance kept John from trusting his son-in-law. Jennifer was walking up the stairs to the top of the stairs. She took Michael under her arm and pulled him to the third floor. There was the largest room with a huge window and a small terrace. Jennifer and Michael had chosen this place for themselves together. The woman wanted to arrange on the terrace a corner of rest with flowers, and Michael dreamed of sitting there and reading books. However, their desires did not contradict each other. As soon as the hatch leading to the stairs slammed shut, Jennifer spun in place and started laughing loudly. Michael looked at her with a half smile. "Have you decided to go crazy?" "I guess you just know. I feel like this is the first white streak in my life, like there were none before, a lifetime-long black streak." Michael slowly walked over to Jennifer and hugged her. "May the white streak be as long as the black streak." Jennifer reached into her bag with her hand and pulled out a time-yellowed, framed ship from there. It was here, in this room, that the symbol of their happy life would hang.
Subscribe and click the bell.
I wish you never to know trouble and sorrow. Maria cried too. The bride's aunt, thank you, smiled Molly. I'm glad that I finally got out of my aunt's care. She didn't like her not young husband. In fact, she was a little afraid of Robert. He was rude and irascible, but he didn't show any aggression to the young bride. Rather, on the contrary, treated her reverently, as if to a porcelain doll, which could at any moment fall and break. The girl at first did not want to hear about Robert's feelings. 2 years ago, she came to work in his small firm, the only one in a provincial town. The man immediately drew attention to the beautiful young employee, and literally from the first day did not give her a pass. At some point, Molly even wanted to quit, although she knew that it is unlikely to find a good job in her specialty elsewhere. And then an aunt intervened, who had been raising Molly since she was 8 years old. At one time, Maria formalized guardianship over her niece. The girl's parents led a dissolute lifestyle. First, her mother ran away from the city, leaving the girl to her alcoholic father, who was soon imprisoned for life for a serious crime. Molly wanted to take her to an orphanage, but in the fate of the girl intervened a native aunt. On the father's side, Maria was not at all guided by kinship feelings for Molly. She was motivated by self-interest. Molly was left with her father's apartment, which the aunt stole. The woman put the apartment in order and safely rented for many years, and after she reached adulthood, persuaded her to sell the apartment and invest the money in the construction of a common house. "We are one big and friendly family. We will sell your apartment, start building a spacious house, and then sell ours. And with the proceeds, we will leave our new house with beautiful furniture and buy a car." Aunt Maria persuaded me. By virtue of her young age and without the character of achievement, agreed to the apartment. It was quickly sold, but the construction of the house has not started. "We have to wait a little," the aunt said. "The situation in the country is unstable right now. We will wait for better times and build a house." Thus, the dwelling was left not only without an apartment, but also without a propiska. The aunt categorically refused to register her niece, arguing that she would have to pay even more money for utilities. Having learned that the director of the company where Molly works shows a lot of attention to her, Maria, as off the chain, snapped day and night, pestered her niece with her moralizing. She tried to reason the girl, explaining that such a chance can fall only once in a lifetime. "Just try to quit such a good job. I'll throw you out on the street," the woman once threatened. "I've spent 12 years raising you, feeding you, clothing you. Where's the gratitude?" Realizing that it is better to live a quiet life with an unloved but wealthy man than to endure the endless scandals of Aunt Maria, Molly was forced to agree to marry Robert. Employees discouraged the girl, asking her not to do anything stupid because their chief had terrible rumors. People said that Robert had already had 2 wives, that he was a tyrant and a pervert. Both of the man's previous wives had gone to a madhouse. It was as if after what had happened, the man had sold everything and moved to live in their small town. Molly realized that this was just another gossip and fiction of the locals, who often liked to invent some creepy story about a new person who came to live in their provincial town. "Thank you all for your wishes and congratulations. You can have fun until morning, and it's time for me and my young wife to rest," Robert announced, rising from the table. "Shall we stay a little longer?" shyly asked the victorious girl. "It's so much fun here. I don't want our party to end so quickly." "Don't worry, my dear. I'll make you such a holiday at home that you'll remember for the rest of your life," laughed the man. "Let's go to the car." Robert insistently hugged the girl and almost forcefully led her outside. Only now Molly realized that she had done something stupid. She wasn't ready for a family relationship with this strange man. She wanted to turn around and run back to her house. She didn't have a home, though, and her aunt was unlikely to let her in. "Come in, don't be shy. You are the mistress of this house now," Robert said, showing her the spacious living room. "This is where we will receive guests. In that far room we'll make a nursery in time. And over there is our bedroom." The man pointed to a room at the end of the hallway. "Go take a bath, then I'll show you our family nest." Molly blushed and lowered her head. But there was nothing to do. Robert was her husband, and she was obliged to fulfill her marital duty. The girl stood in the shower stall for a long time under the cool stream of water. She does not know how much time had passed, but an insistent knock on the door quickly brought her back to reality. "I'm on my way," Molly shouted. "Turn the water off faster. I'm tired of waiting," Robert shouted irritably. At that moment, Molly wanted to fall through the ground. She had never felt such shame in her life. Coming out of the bath, she saw her husband at the door. "Darling, let's go quickly. I have everything ready," smiled the man. Molly entered the room and lost speech from surprise and fear. The room had a muted basement light. There was no furniture in it at all except for a huge metal bed. Looking into the family bed, the girl turned pale. The whole bed was covered in weighty chains, and handcuffs lay in the middle. "What is this?" Stammering, the girl asked, realizing that she had fallen into the clutches of a mentally ill man. "You'll like my prankster," Robert said darkly, picking up a leather whip from the floor. "No, you're crazy." shouted the girl, holding out from the room. Halt, roared the man, rushing to catch up with his young spouse. Molly jumped outside in just slippers and a terry cloth robe, deftly cut through the high fence, and ran without a backward glance to wherever she was going. She wanted to get home quickly, to complain to her aunt about what had happened to her. She reached Maria Genadievna's house far past midnight. Molly had to walk through yards and alleys. The passers-by looked away from the girl in the white coat, and some laughed openly, pointing their fingers at her. Seeing Robert's cars near her aunt's yard, Molly huddled near a neighbor's tree. Don't worry, Robert. As soon as she shows up, I'll call you right away. Those bastards. Who'd have thought? She'll come back to you anyway. I won't even let her on my doorstep. The woman has ruined the whole neighborhood. No, dear Maria. Please let Molly in and call me. So she can't hear you. I'll be right over. I love my wife very much. She's too young to realize her happiness. Robert said calmly. As you wish, said the woman, softened his tone. Here, so to speak, a little financial help. Always ready to help dear relatives, said Robert, counting the bills. Thank you, Robert. You spoil me. Maria smiled, tucking the money into his pocket. Molly sighed heavily, realizing that she could not go to her aunt. Tears came to her eyes. She didn't think that her own person would sell her out so easily in utter hopelessness and despair. She found her way around the nighttime city. She didn't care what passers-by thought when they looked at her, nor did she see any passers-by. The night streets were completely empty, and the lights in the windows had long since gone out. She looked longingly at the dark windows of the houses. Happy people. She thought bitterly. They have a roof over their heads, and even that has been taken away from me. Feverishly wondering what she should do next, the girl reached the railroad station. Molly wanted to get far away from this city, but as without documents, money, and slippers and a robe, where could she go in such a form? Sitting down on a bench, the girl began to wait for something. She didn't know anything herself. Soon dawn was running behind the three. Molly woke up from her bitter thoughts when she heard a noise behind her. Seeing a young woman who was sweeping the street, rejoiced. Excuse me, said the girl softly, approaching the janitor. I found myself in a difficult position. Do you think it's easy for me? Smirked the woman, resting on the girl with a heavy breath. I can't help you. I'm not asking for money. Maybe you could lend me some clothes. Molly asked. She's gone. The woman was indignant. You think I have a trunk full of clothes at home and nothing to wear? Get out of here, or I'll call the police. Molly stepped away from the woman, realizing that she was unlikely to help. When she heard the signal of the approaching train, she went to the platform. Going into an empty carriage, sat at the window. The girl, with indifference, spent a look, flashed in the window made of town. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew that she would hardly ever return to this town. Look out, the doors are closing. She heard Molly through her sleep and opened her eyes. The carriage was already filled with hundreds of passengers. None of them paid attention to the girl. Everyone was busy with their own worries. School years came to mind. All the class came to this monastery on an excursion. Then the creative life of the nuns seemed to her a dull and boring existence. She did not understand how she could bury herself alive in the walls of a sullen monastery. A salutary thought instantly came into her head. She was now very jealous of the quiet, safe life that reigned in the monastery. When she saw the train approaching the station, she rushed to the exit. Molly had been walking for an hour or two through the forest. She was terribly thirsty. It was very damp and cold. With increasing frequency, clouds overhead said that it would soon start to rain. The strength was leaving the girl. At some point, she thought she was lost. But when she saw a high fence and the gap of huge trees, she was glad. Approaching the iron gate, Molly pressed the bell button. Behind the gate, there was complete silence. It seemed that there was absolutely no one there. Only after about 10 minutes, heavy footsteps were heard. What do you want? Asked a sullen old woman. She opened the heavy wicket. Please help me. In desperation, cried Molly, throwing herself on her knees in front of the woman. Come in, the nun said in a rough voice, looking at the girl with interest. How are you running from whom? Asked Nancy. A woman of no particular age was looking at Molly with an inquisitive gaze. She tried to look into her soul to understand who stood before her. The girl wanted to start a story about her hard life, about her misfortunes, but the lump in her throat prevented her from uttering a single sound. Shuttered Molly silently cried, "Okay, I see, you need to rest. Afterwards we will talk calmly," said Nancy, instructing the assistant to take the girl away. Mother Nancy led Molly to the far cell, which was behind a similar courtyard. She pointed to the door to the shower room and threw some clothes on the narrow bed. I'll tell them to bring you some soup. By evening you can rest. You'll be called for evening prayers," the woman said gruffly. Molly was not used to being in a closed space among gray walls. The atmosphere in the monastery was very depressing. Everyone around was silent and sullen, as if wearing some kind of mourning. I did not like this attitude and way of life. After all, she is a cheerful person. But in this situation, this monastery was her saving grace. The girl did not want to return to the worldly life under any pretext. There was too much cruelty and injustice there. "What do you want to do next, Molly?" asked the abbess, listening carefully to the girl. "I understood correctly that you have no relatives or close friends. There is only one aunt, and she turned out to be a traitor. It is scary to imagine what some people are capable of for the sake of money," Molly said sadly. "Well, stay with us for now," agreed Nancy. "I want to become a nun. I have nothing to do in the world," the girl said confidently. Wait, with that the woman finally grinned. "Not everything is as quick and easy as you think." 3 months had passed since Molly's escape. The girl had gotten used to the unusual way of life. She has become a novice, and there is an abbess attached to the convent. Nancy said it was too early to think about tonsure. It is not a game. Before you take such an important step, you should think very carefully. You're a young and very beautiful girl. Moreover, you came to us not out of love for the Most High, but out of despair. We are not persecuting you. You are a good man. Live at the monastery. And time will sort things out," said the wise woman. Molly's duties included cleaning the refectory, helping in the kitchen, and buying groceries. At first, the girl was afraid to go outside the monastery, but after realizing that the monastery is far from her hometown, in a nearby village, no one knew her. She started going to the market once a week. Molly needs to pick raspberries for the winter in the forest. Take Mother Nancy as a helper and go to the forest. There was a difference. Good, the girl was glad that she had a chance to walk in the woods and breathe a breath of freedom. "I can go by myself." "No." "Will you two go together?" "It's not right for a young girl to wander the woods alone," objected the old woman. Walking through the woods, Molly became sad. He remembered his childhood years when he and his grandfather used to go to the forest for mushrooms. Grandfather taught his granddaughter how to distinguish a mushroom from a grape, how to navigate by the sun. The happiest years of her life were behind her. Then there was life with her aunt, constant reproaches, scandals. Then it got really bad. Tired of Nancy's constant muttering, Molly deliberately left the woman behind. In the woods, she navigated like a fish in water, so she was not afraid to get lost. Leaving the house, Malenkova began to collect white berries in a large bough. Hearing behind her back the quiet crunch of dry twigs, smirked. "You can't hide from this Nancy anywhere. You were watching the subsoil." "I thought she'd gone ahead," Molly thought. "I'm sorry." The girl heard a hoarse male voice behind her back and turned pale with fear. "You just do not be frightened." "I did not mean any harm," turned around Molly and saw a young man. To put it mildly, his appearance was not very good. He looked infirm and sickly. "Don't be afraid," said the guy's lips in front of her ears. "Perhaps you have a sip of water." "Yes," said Molly, holding out a small flask of cold medieval water. "Are you lost?" The stranger greedily pounced on the water, taking several large yearlings. I stopped. "I'm sorry, I almost drank your entire supply. Keep the tinfoil. Do you need any help? There's a monastery nearby. I can bring you," the girl offered. "I need help, but I can't go out to people," the boy said. "Are you from the convent?" "Yes, I live at the convent," Molly said quietly. realizing that she was dealing with either a psycho or a criminal. "I'll go. There are a lot of us here. I'm enough now." The girl lied. "Are you scared? Don't be." "Help me, please," in desperation asked the boy. "What's your name?" "I'm Alex." Molly introduced herself to the girl. "Molly, be a friend. Help me. You don't have to tell anyone that you saw me well." "I wasn't even thinking of telling anyone," Molly assured her. "I need some clothes, a t-shirt and pants," Alex explained. The guy's clothes were really in bad shape. His shirt and pants were torn to shreds. There was talk of him not spending the first day in the woods. "I'm also really hungry," lowering my head, Alex. "I can bring food a little later," the girl explained. "With men's clothes is more difficult. Tomorrow I'll be at the market. I could run to the store, but I have no money of my own." "No problem with money." The guy rejoiced, handing Molly a few bills. "When it starts to get dark, approach about 5 meters to the left of the gate. I cannot go out. Already threw the groceries over the fence. I'll try to bring clothes tomorrow around the same time." "Where can I find you?" Molly asked. "I'll be waiting for you." "Thank you. You'll learn me a lot," smiled Alex. "I have to go. See you tomorrow." The girl heard that Nancy was looking for her and hurried away. All the way back, she thought about the strange guy. He looked like a decent, normal person. But why was he hiding in the woods, and who was he hiding from? There were only questions in my head that had no answers yet. Having come with Nancy and 2 other persons to the market, Molly waited for the right moment to slip away from her companions. Getting to the clothing store unnoticed, she quickly bought the necessary items. She spent the whole night thinking about the strange stranger in the forest. On the one hand, felt sorry for the guy. Molly, of all people, knew what it was like to run and hide without any support. On the other hand, Alex was a concern. There's no telling who he really is or who he's hiding from in the woods. After lunch, Molly and Nancy went to pick raspberries again. "In the woods, do not run," gave instructions. "Nancy yesterday ran 2 hours out of the half-empty, came after me to walk. I know some good places." "All right." The girl humbly agreed. She carried clothes, bread and water for Alex in a basket. She was afraid that Nancy would not notice, so she tried to keep away from the observant old woman. Molly slowly trailed behind her, stepping aside the small one where the boy was supposed to be waiting. "Hello," Alex whispered quietly, appearing from behind the thicket. "I was afraid you wouldn't come." "How could I?" "You're waiting, and there's no one to help you in this face but me. Here are some clothes and some food." Molly pulled the boy a small package. "Thank you, you are my guardian angel," rejoiced Alex. "Let me help you pick raspberries. Come on, I'll show you a place where there are a lot of them. In half an hour, we'll have a basket full of them. Let's go." The girl agreed. She felt easy and calm around this stranger. Alex told all the way that in this country of the forest raspberries had already sung, and in the other one they would ripen in about a week. "Alex, who are you hiding from?" the girl asked bluntly. She watched the guy greedily devouring bread and drinking water. "Just promise me that you won't be afraid of me," he asked. "I promise," Molly assured him. "I escaped from the colony. You probably won't believe it, but I was convicted of crimes I didn't commit. What's more, I had nothing to do with it at all. It's a serious crime, and I'd have to sit for a very long time," the boy said seriously. "How is that possible? How could the court sentence an innocent man?" Molly wondered. "How did you escape? Is it really that easy?" "You are very naive," Alex smiled. "It's obvious that you know life very badly. And what's next? Will you sit in the woods all your life? They will find you anyway. I need to prove my innocence, and no one else can do that. First, we need to find one person and make him confess to perjury," the boy explained. "How long have you been here?" "About a week. Explored this forest up and down about 2 kilometers. There's a small swamp from here. The water's more or less clear. You can swim in it, but you can't drink it. It tastes bitter. And on the other side, I built myself a small tent. It is difficult to call this structure reliable, but for the night you can shelter," the guy smiled. Alex stared at the beautiful girl. He could not understand what she was doing in the monastery. Gaining courage, he decided to ask Molly. "You and I had a frank conversation. Tell me, how long have you lived here?" "A few months. I was sheltered once in this monastery. I came there in my slippers and bathrobe. Hungry, scared, barely able to stand on my feet from fatigue." Molly said cheerfully, remembering the bad times in her life. "Did someone hurt you?" Alex turned pale, clenching his fists. He had a great sympathy for the girl at first sight. Perhaps only those people who are deeply unhappy themselves are capable of it. Persecuted, and needing the support of help and love. He wanted to protect her. Molly looked very defenseless, fragile. Molly thought for a while and then told him all about herself. He listened in silence. It's amazing how one person can have so many problems and troubles all at once. It's a shame I'm on the run now. I would like to see your aunt and the man, to explain what is good and what is bad. But nothing, there will be a holiday on our street. Molly, what are you going to do next? Do you really plan to? Lock you up in a convent for the rest of your life? Yes, I've given it a lot of thought. It is, of course, boring and tedious there. But on the other hand, the monastery has an atmosphere of peace. You don't have to think about tomorrow. You don't have a problem to worry about at all. I hope that someday I will take the tonsure and become a nun." The girl said calmly, "Molly, Molly." In the distance came the irritated voice of Mother Nancy. "It's not time," the girl said fearfully. "God forbid we should be seen here. In the evening, come to the same spot by the fence. I'll drop a bag of groceries." "Thanks, Molly. I'll see you tomorrow." "Will you come with Hope?" asked the guy. "I don't know." "If you send for raspberries there again, please come. I will be very much waiting," asked Alex. "You are like a rainbow ray appeared in my gray life. Looking at you makes me want to live." Molly took a basket full of raspberries and quickly went to Nancy. All night she prayed for Alex. For some reason, the girl felt the hard fate of the guy and wanted everything to be well with him. In the morning, she wanted to see Alex again. Molly liked talking to this handsome man. She liked listening to his pleasant voice, seeing his smile. The girl didn't realize yet that she had fallen in love with Alex. "We're going for raspberries today?" she asked Nancy. "No, we've already picked enough. We've got enough for the whole winter. Today we're having a general cleaning," said the woman, Molly sullenly. She didn't think she'd be so upset about not seeing her boyfriend again. Her heart ached for him because he would be waiting. Sitting alone in the woods, hungry and without water, the girl went back to her cell and began to think feverishly about how to get out of the monastery unnoticed, to take the boys some food and say goodbye, to wrap the bread and water in a bundle. Molly crouched by the window of the cell. She didn't know how she would get out of the monastery unnoticed in broad daylight, but she still hoped she would succeed. At 12 o'clock, the girl heard the noisy clanking of a heavy gate. A large truck drove into the courtyard up to the top, loaded with metal beds, hiding a bundle. Molly went out into the yard. "Why are you trying to get underfoot?" Nancy asked in a displeased tone, instructing the workers where to bring the furniture in, go to the kitchen and help. Molly said nothing to the old woman. By passing the truck carefully, she found herself at the open gate. She doesn't know what she's doing. She ran into the woods. Alex was sitting next to Olenek on the very spot where they parted yesterday. "Molly." The guy smiled, handing the girl a handful of white raspberries. "Take it. I picked the biggest berries especially for you. I was afraid you wouldn't come anymore." "I came to say goodbye," Molly said quietly. "Here, take some bread and water. Molly, come with me. I realize that I am in an unenviable position, but I promise to do everything I can to get out of this situation as soon as possible. You'll never regret trusting me." "Where are we going?" "To that shack you built for the campground?" "No, Alex, I can't do that to the abbess. Nancy trusted me, she gave me shelter. And then I'm not going back to the worldly life. It's too troublesome. I'll wait until tomorrow to give you plenty of time to think. If you come, I'd be delighted. And if you don't, I don't know. I'd be sorry to see our relationship end before it's begun. I can't hide in the woods anymore. I wanted to leave yesterday, but I couldn't. I wanted to see you." Molly didn't listen to the boy any further and quickly ran back. She wanted to get to her hiding place. She wanted to hide from all worldly temptations. Abbess Nancy was right. It's too soon for her to take her vows. She's not ready to devote herself fully to the ministry. Gentlemen, Molly was lucky. The truck hadn't left yet, and the gates to the convent were open. Stealthily, moving into her cell, the girl fell on the bed and silently sobbed. "Where are you?" A furious Nancy entered the cell. "What's the matter with you?" "Why do I have to run around, looking for you all over the grounds? Where have you been?" Molly didn't answer anything and remained lying on the bed, hugging her pillow. I realized the situation was getting out of control and rushed to the abbess for help. Nancy silently listened to the woman, and after a little thought, ordered her to leave Molly alone. She would deal with the stroppy girl herself. "What's going on with you?" "Molly." Nancy entered the cell, closing the door tightly behind her. Molly was not surprised to see the abbess. Knew Nancy would be happy to complain about her. Looking into Nancy's bright, kind eyes, couldn't tell a lie. It seemed to her that this woman could read minds with ease. Could see right through her. "I think I'm in love. It has never happened to me before," she whispered softly. "I'm a sinner. There's no excuse for me. No, sweet love, it's not a sin. It's the brightest feeling that gives our lives meaning." "Wait, who could you be in love with?" Nancy wondered, looking intently at Molly. "We met him in the village. He works at the market," Molly lied. She realized that the abbess would not accept or approve of the story of a fugitive criminal. "Do you want to leave?" the woman asked bluntly. "I don't know. I'm scared. I can't hold you. And I don't want to. I want you to know that you can always come to me for help. I've gotten used to you over these past few months, and I care about your fate. Anyway, I don't see the point of your staying in our monastery any longer. Will you come and see me as you mean to? I'll give you a small sum from our fund. It will be enough for the first time, and then learn to live on your own," Nancy said calmly. "Thank you," Molly smiled and hugged the woman. The girl quickly gathered herself after the abbess left. Her support was the impetus to make an important decision in her life. She really wanted to dedicate her life to serving God. But apparently, desire alone was not enough. A person needs strong arguments to make such a drastic change in their life. "To be happy," Molly pronounced Nancy. "Blessings, girl. Remember, you're going to have a tough time there. Try to learn to cope with difficulties and problems. This is the main condition for surviving in the world." "Thank you," Molly said, wiping away the traitorous tears. Left alone, the girl was a little confused, feeling a strange sense of freedom and independence. For 19 years of her life, she was not used to making decisions on her own. First, her aunt did it for her, and then Abbess Nancy. Alex called the girl, approaching the raspberries. "Molly, have you made up your mind?" The guy smiled, hugging the girl in joy. "I'm glad. You did the right thing. Where are we going now?" Molly smiled. "First, we need to get out of this forest, although I am very used to it and feel like a forest master," laughed the guy. "Let's go," stretched out her hand the girl. "I know the way out." Alex held Molly's hand tightly, as if he was afraid that his happiness would slip away from him as quickly as it appeared. They didn't know what was waiting for them beyond the forest, but they sincerely believed that together they would find it easier and easier to overcome all the hardships of life. "Where are we going?" Molly asked. "We have to stop somewhere. Honestly, I'm scared for you." Every man in uniform was frightened. "I'm scared to imagine being all alone again." "Don't be. It's been a while since I escaped. The manhunt has long since subsided, and I don't think anyone's looking for me in this village. Do you need to rent an apartment? It's better if the landlord doesn't see me. I'll give you the money and tell you what to say. You'll manage without me." Alex smiled. "I'll try," Molly said decisively. Young people were sitting in a cafe, drinking coffee with cakes. They planned their further actions. Molly felt very light. Near Alex, she had the impression that she knew him all her life. The guy seemed reliable and confident. She didn't know what he was in for, but for some reason she trusted every word he said. Having received clear instructions, the girl went in search of accommodation, having chosen a nice apartment on the outskirts of the town in the quiet district. The woman paid the landlady for 2 months and took the keys. Are you going to live by yourself? The woman asked. I don't really care, but I still want to know if we can. Molly lied. He's finishing his business and he'll be here soon. That's what I thought, smiled the landlady. The main thing is to keep quiet and keep order. The rest is none of my business. Don't worry, we won't give you any trouble, Molly assured her. After seeing the landlady off, the girl followed Alex. She was a little uncomfortable being alone with a man she didn't know very well. At some point, Molly regretted that she had acted rashly, leaving the monastery into the unknown. But seeing the bright, pure look of the guy calmed down. Once in the closed space, Alex nervously paced around the room, always looking out the window. You're scared, Molly realized. Maybe we should move farther away. It's not that I'm scared, it's just nervous, I guess. You know, it was much more secure in the woods, the guy smiled. Well, let's not talk about sad things. You rest. And I'll fry potatoes for us, my specialty recipe. Alex, maybe you can tell me more about yourself. I know absolutely nothing about you. Okay, let's go to the kitchen and talk about it. I'm an orphan. I was raised in an orphanage. Who am I and where do I come from? I don't know. I was dropped off at the city hospital when I was 3 months old. Just recently, I thought I'd finally gotten lucky. I met someone I thought was pretty good. Alex became my best friend and mentor, gave me a job, a place to live, support, and hope for a bright future. And then he took it all away, taking away the only thing I owned. My freedom. Who is this man? Are you talking in riddles? Molly asked. I met him by chance at a friend's wedding. That same night, he offered me a great job as a freight forwarder. Alex headed one of the largest trucking firms in the city. My duties included escorting vans over long distances. Who would have thought he'd be capable of such sneakiness? You were set up? Molly guessed. Yeah, one time they found a whole shipment of guns instead of bricks in one of the trucks. You see, my boss pretended not to know where it came from. Said it was my doing. And he said and the rest of us confirmed that everyone went straight against you. 2 paid witnesses were enough, but the others just kept quiet. Who would want to lose their job? And there was no way to prove your innocence. As you can see, the chief's got his hands full in this town. He's a big, successful businessman, a respected man in town. And what am I? An orphan with nothing to show for it. Yeah, Molly shook her head. How are you going to justify yourself? You think your boss will come to his senses and admit it was his doing? No, of course not. I made friends with a good man in the zone. We had a lot in common. William was raised in the same orphanage as me. True, he is 15 years older, but still in that place we seemed to be close to each other. We had the same caretakers and the same memories. He's the one who put you on the run? Not only did he, but he helped me. In fact, he promised me he'd help me nail my old boss to the wall. William's not the last man in criminal circles, and he doesn't throw words around. How'd he help you if you spent so much time in the woods? Why didn't you run to him? The girl was surprised. Unfortunately, things didn't go as we planned. They were waiting for me in one direction, but I had to run in the opposite direction. No one expected that I would be caught so quickly, and the dogs would pick up the trail. I lost my way and ran. Wherever I could see. What now? Molly didn't understand. We can't just sit here indefinitely. Everything's gonna be okay. Alex hastened to reassure her. First, we need to find William. And then we need to find Robert Kolosov. According to the latest information, he disappeared from the city. After all this fuss, he sold everything and left. Like you said, Molly went pale. Robert, why are you surprised? Have you heard anything about him? I have. I suspect my pervert husband and your abuser are the same person. He showed up in our town 2 years ago with a lot of money, started a trucking company right away. That's a twist. Alex whistled. Fate sent you to me. We need to go to William and seriously deal with our common offender. I'm very glad I met you, Molly smiled. At first, I was scared out of my mind. Then I saw your eyes and realized that a man with such a kind gaze couldn't hurt a woman. Thank you. It's nice to know someone believes in you. You know, until I met you, I thought I'd never make it out of the woods alive. 2 days without water. dirty, with tattered clothes. Where could I go? They were looking for me hard at the time. If I'd gone out to the humans, I'd have been caught. You're my guardian angel. I don't believe we met by chance. Such meetings are never accidental. You were given to me by fate, seriously said the guy. Before I met you, I had nothing to live for. And now I'm afraid. Afraid of what? Of the police? No, I'm scared for you. I don't think I'll survive if I can't help you in time. I thought you said William was your buddy to take care of things. Molly was worried. I hope so. As they say, the Lord willing, we'll take about another month and go to William. I know roughly where to find him, the guy said. Alex decided not to wait that long. About the monitor in the news channels of the newspaper. He realized that there was no special hunt for him. Even photos of himself nowhere to find. It's weird. Maybe they're not looking for me. There's silence everywhere. I said in bewilderment. Is that possible? Molly was surprised. I don't know, but the fact remains. Today we'll probably get ready, and tomorrow we'll go to the big city. It's easier to get lost out there, and I'd like to settle this matter sooner rather than later. I'm tired of running, tired of being startled by every sound and rustle. What do you say? I will always support you. When Alex arrived in town, he was a little confused. The young people decided to take a cab and go straight there. The administrator of the bar smiled politely at Alex Molly, but gave no information about his master. If you need him urgently, you wait. William will stop by later in the evening. The young men took the table at the end of the hall and waited patiently. William did not wait long. Apparently, the receptionist informed the man about the visit of strange guests. Alex is alive, the stocky bald man said, hugging his friend. Who's that with you? William wondered, looking at Molly. Molly is my guardian angel, for whom I would tear anyone. The boy said proudly. I see. Wonderful girl. I approve. William smiled, kissing Molly's hand. The girl felt awkward in the company of a man she didn't know very well. She didn't like William's scrutinizing stare. More recently, after she had spent a few months in a convent, she had learned to be a bit of a judge of people. William did not inspire confidence in her at all. So we're standing in the middle of a bar, and we're on our way to my place. Are you my guests tonight? Not just tonight, said William, heading for the exit. Sash, do we have to stay at his place? Molly asked quietly. Don't be afraid of him, smiled the guy. William is only formidable in appearance, but in general he is a kind man, trusting the life of Alex. The girl calmed down a little. After all, she trusted him and was not afraid of anything around him. William brought the guests to the country house and said that they could live here for a while. After dinner, Molly went to rest, and Alex decided to talk to a friend. It's like a soap opera. William was surprised. You meet a girl in the woods who turns out to be the wife of your enemy. If I didn't know all the circumstances, I'd think it was a setup. But nothing, as they say, is for the best. We'll take care of your Robert. I don't need a couple days to get my affairs in order. Then I'll take care of you. In the meantime, Molly, you rest up. You can go fishing. There's a river nearby. Thank you, William. I'm glad I got to you safely. To be honest, there was no hope of shining anymore. I didn't think you were alive either. Who'd have thought things would get so twisted and they'd be looking for you right away? Well, it's all over now. I'm off. You guys come by tomorrow at 7 o'clock. It's my anniversary party. William invited me. Maybe we shouldn't go out on the town too much, asked Alex. Don't worry, no one will be looking for you in my place. They don't come to my place, grinned the man. You respect me, and you stole yours. Maybe a little. Molly liked the temporary shelter. There was silence all around. The house was located a few kilometers from the nearest village, away from prying eyes. It was quiet and cozy. Tomorrow we're going to Williams for the anniversary. I don't know what to get him. I think he has everything. And we don't have much money. Alex was thinking, maybe we shouldn't go, it's not close. And you better not show your face in the city, Molly warned. William asked that we respect his car tomorrow will send for us, explained the guy. The next day, the young people went into town, picking out a gift at an antique shop. They drove to the bar. Guests had already gathered, filling almost all the space in the hall. The birthday boy sat in the center of the table, happily accepting the congratulations of friends. "Thank you for coming." William approached Alex with Molly. "By the way, a man should be arriving soon who can help us get in touch with Robert. He has a lot of influence over that man. Are you seriously hoping that Alex will plead guilty and go to jail instead of me?" Alex was surprised. "No, of course, it's impossible. But he is quite capable of shifting the blame to someone else. Anyway, let's wait for my buddy and talk about it." William left, but soon returned with a frightened, pale face. Alex immediately realized that something serious had happened. "What?" asked anxiously. "I don't know exactly, but something I don't like very much. Those two types at the bar try to go out through the kitchen into the yard. Molly, let her stay here for now." "I guess I was wrong to invite you for an ear," William whispered. Alex shifted his gaze to the steamy counter and realized that William was right. The two men seemed to be chatting casually behind the bar, but it was obvious to the naked eye that they were unusual owl regulars. "Do not be afraid of anything," whispered Alex, frightened Molly, and kissed the girl, went on cotton legs towards the kitchen. The guests were having fun, not paying any attention to the people around them. Only William and Molly froze, watching Alex. The guy didn't have time to reach the kitchen. Several people rushed to him from all sides. The guy was deftly laid on the floor by the snap of handcuffs on his wrists. "Alex," screamed Molly desperately. "Let him go. Don't touch him." "Hush," whispered William. "Or do you want to go with him?" "We won't help Alex now. We'll only hurt him." Molly covered her face with her hands and sobbed. The thing she feared most had happened. She had lost him, and this time it would be for a long time. How could it be? Why? Who have we wronged so much? I prayed for him day and night and whispered for him. "Molly girl, calm down. Come with me now. You should be alone for a while to think and come to your senses." "Tears, Alex, will not help," William said calmly, taking the girl to the back rooms. The man escorted Molly into the kitchen, nodding for her to come to them. "Yes, William. What can I do for you?" asked the ruddy-faced woman with the good-natured face. "Jenna, take care of my guests. Please calm the girl down and make sure she doesn't go anywhere. Basically, you take charge of her with your head." Ordered by a man. Okay, don't worry. I will anticipate," assured Jenna. After the owner had left, the cook locked a door to the street, just in case. The woman knew her master's temper, and if the girl, God forbid, ran away, she'd be in trouble. "Who are you? What happened in there?" Jenna nodded at the hall, realizing that the girl had no intention of making conversation. She took out a bottle of wine from the nightstand. "Drink." Molly ordered Molly that French wine helps better than any sedative. Molly unexpectedly took in her hands a glass with dark cherry liquid and drank it in a gulp. "Good girl, good for you," praised Jenna, filling the glass again. "Now calm down and tell me everything." "It's a long story," Molly said sadly. "It's okay. We're in no hurry. They'll be out till morning anyway. It'll make it easier for your daughter to talk." Molly told the nice woman everything. Jenna was right and did feel better for a little while, but only for a moment, realizing that Alex was gone. The girl next to her cried again. "That's quite a story. Poor girl. Who would have guessed that you would be in so much trouble?" Jenna shook her head. "What's next? What are you going to do?" "I don't know anything at all," said Molly. "All hope is in William." "Take my advice, honey, you can't trust anyone, especially not these people," the cook whispered, nodding toward the hall where the party was in full swing. "Remember, after all, if your own aunt sold you what you want from strangers, thank you. You remembered you threw Molly out with your nose. Stop whining. You don't have to show anyone your weakness. There are very few people who are genuinely willing to feel sorry for you." "I get it, I'm sure," Molly said. Jenna took a piece of paper and a pencil. She quickly wrote her phone number and slipped it into her pocket. Just in case, just in case. William entered the kitchen, assessing the situation, winked cheerfully at the women. "Calm down. Good. There's a man who was supposed to deal with his fiancée. You'll meet him." "Yes, of course," Molly perked up. William led the girl into the office, where a gray-haired, intelligent man was waiting for them, nodding to the owner to leave them alone. Saying hello to Molly. "My name is Victor. You're Robert's wife." The man smirked. "But as a spouse." "Yes, we're married, but that's about it. I had to run away from my husband right after the wedding. Tell me, will you help Alex get Robert to tell the truth?" Molly asked the naive girl with hope. Victor laughed. "How can I force such a powerful man to do anything against his will? But with your help, we can manipulate Robert. Don't you agree, Molly? What should I do?" Molly turned pale. "I'm not going back to my husband. That's out of the question. Let you first calm down a little, and tomorrow we will talk in a calm atmosphere," said Victor. "Okay," agreed the girl. Molly was left alone in the office and was at a complete loss. She already realized that no one was in a hurry to rescue Alex. Everyone was busy doing their own thing, having fun, dancing quietly, yelling songs. None of those present cared about her grief. How was the conversation? William came into the study. "We rescheduled it for tomorrow," the girl explained. "Only we haven't agreed where we will meet, where I will look for this Victor. You won't have to look for him. He'll come himself. He'll stay with me for a while." William said in a tone that didn't tolerate objections. "No, it's inconvenient. I'll get a little room. I'll be more comfortable." "Molly, what room?" "We need to get the jar out now. We could need you at any moment. You're suggesting we run all over town looking for you. You don't think I'd do anything wrong, do you? I got a wife and a son at home. By the way, we'll tell them you're the new governess. I just fired the last one the other day." "Okay," Molly agreed. A little calmed down, she wanted to trust this man because he spoke well of him. Alex considered him a best friend, almost a brother. But something told her that her gut told her that William was not at all what he wanted to seem. Molly was uncomfortable in someone else's house. William's wife, Julia, squinted at her. The woman must have thought that the new governess was her husband's mistress. He arrived with his wife around 5 o'clock, assigned one of the best rooms, and later announced that he had found a wonderful governess for his son. Julia remained silent. She didn't dare to contradict her husband. "Good morning," greeted William, coming into the girl's room. "How do you like the new place?" "Everything is fine. If something is wrong, say thank you to me right away." "It's great." "William, any word on Alex? Is there any way to get him some groceries and clothes?" Molly asked. "Don't worry about it. The guys have already done everything. Is your Alex like in a sanatorium?" Loudly laughed the man. "Victor is coming today. I advise you to listen to him in everything. Alex is the only one who can help." "Got it." "Yes, I'm ready to help him," the girl said. She really wanted it to be over quickly. Most of all, she dreamed that Alex would be acquitted and released. After all, without him, life was freezing, lost its colors. "Could you please specify what my duties are? Your wife doesn't communicate with me, and your son is rude and avoidant," Molly complained. "It seems strange that the governess does not leave the room and does not deal with the child. I'm so sick of her jealousy." The man got angry. "And really cannot and say she has a tongue like a broomstick. In a moment we'll tell everyone and you and Alex. And I'm already being dragged. They suspect I was the mastermind behind his escape. Anyway, just bear with me for a while. I think things will settle down soon." Molly spent half the day in the room. Toward evening, Victor finally arrived. The man was clearly agitated about something. "Hello, Molly. I've been up all night thinking about how to influence your husband," the man said. "Victor, please don't call Robert my husband. Our marriage is more of a misunderstanding, especially since I'm sure he's divorced me already." I asked, "Molly, can you tell me what I need to do?" "As far as I know, you worked at his firm." "Yes. 2 years exactly. Surely you still have friends or buddies there, right?" the man asked. "Well, in general, yes. My coworkers and I were very friendly." "We need to find out some information. Maybe it's classified, and not all the employees are aware of it. We need to get in touch with Robert's confidant. You can do that, and all this information will help to free Alex?" The girl was surprised. "Yes, but you have to blackmail him with something." Robert is not the kind of man who will make concessions, Victor explained. I'll do everything, at least I'll try. We had a good relationship with Robert's deputy. I'm sure David is up to date on all of his boss's business. What exactly am I supposed to know in 3 weeks? He's shipping a big shipment through his firm. We need to know who the customer is. We need to know exactly when the trucks leave, the names of the drivers. What's the paperwork say they're carrying? Point of arrival, and photocopies of the documents, Victor explained. Got it. I'll do my best. Promised Molly the impossible as well. You must realize that this is the only way to help Alex. Victor left, leaving Molly in heavy reflection. Once again, she would have to go back to her town. We must be extremely careful not to fall into the clutches of Robert. There's a lot of important information to be gathered. But will David make contact? Would he rat out the chief? That she didn't know. Julia wandered around the house as if unaccustomed. The realization that William had brought a mistress into the house did not give calm breathing. The woman was moved to tears. She felt sorry for herself. She'd been through so much over the years, hadn't she? When was the first time William was locked up? The woman was penniless with a baby in her arms. She was struggling to make ends meet and still find a way to send packages to her husband. Then he was paroled. William changed a lot, became angry and alien. He had a lot of money almost immediately. Julia did not know what her husband was doing and was very afraid that he would be imprisoned again. He did not answer his wife's questions. He only shouted angrily that it was her business to cook shields, not to meddle in her husband's affairs. When she reached despair, the woman decided to leave her husband, who had become a complete stranger and hated her. Having learned about his wife's plans, he threatened her, advised her to sit quietly and do not interfere. Otherwise, he would have to take her to the woods, to teach her to reason. She agrees. Julia heard the conversation coming from the open door of her husband's study and lurked at the door. Great, William rejoiced. I knew she would do anything for that sucker. What's next? If she gets the information we need, she'll demand Alexa's release. How do we get out of this? I don't want Molly to get pissed off. And if she tells everything Robert, we will not be well, then worriedly said Victor. She won't. William smirked. Denka, okay, woman, she belongs in Turkey in some elite brothel. You'll organize it. You've already thought of everything and calculated everything. Well done, praise. Victor patted his buddy on the shoulder. Of course I'll organize it. For such a beautiful girl, I also made a lot of money. Julia froze in bewilderment. She realized that she was talking about her son's new governess. The woman felt sorry for the girl. She thought that Molly was her husband's mistress, but the girl turned out to be just a pawn in some cruel game of William. Julia spent the whole night thinking about the new governess. Her husband's obsequious conversation with the assistant kept her in suspense. Until an hour ago, she had sincerely hated Molly. Now she felt very sorry for the young girl. The woman would have gladly told her everything, warned her of the danger, but she was afraid. Julia did not know what Molly's reaction would be if the governess rushed to her husband for explanations. She would be in trouble. The woman awoke close to noon. Hearing children's laughter in the yard, she looked out the window. Molly was swinging her son on the swing, and he was laughing merrily. William's words to the brothel came to mind. Deciding to put an end to her husband's lawlessness, Julia quickly dressed and went downstairs. Molly Nikolaevna's mom is very nice. We've been practicing since morning, and now we're playing. The boy reported excitedly. Wonderful, smiled Julia. Run inside. We'll be right there with Molly. The child obediently left, and Julia approached the girl. Who are you? She asked without any preamble. I was confused, Molly. A governess. Can I see your documents, diploma, references? Molly lowered her head, not knowing what to say. She didn't know how to lie and pretend at all. Moreover, she had not expected such a conversation. William had assured her that she would have no problems in his house. It seems to me that you have no diploma or special education. I'm right, Julia asked. Yes, whispered the girl. William is helping my fiancé. Alex has big problems, and no one but your husband can solve them. Now that sounds like the truth, said the woman. It seems to me that my husband will not be able to help your husband. Alex will rather, on the contrary, will drag you into his dirty deeds. Why? Molly was surprised. He promised William of those people for whom the word means nothing. They only care about money. Lots of money. Tell me, can I be sure my husband won't find out about our conversation? The woman asked me bluntly. I won't say anything, Molly promised, not understanding anything. Yesterday I witnessed a conversation from which I realized that you must get information about Robert. I'm right. Yes, that's exactly the information that will help. Alex explained to Molly. No, Julia shook her head. No one is going to release your Alex. My husband has other plans for you. After you get what they want, you'll be sent to Turkey. Just don't think it's for a vacation. The woman smiled sadly. How? The girl couldn't believe it. Why would he want to do that? He promised. Molly was silent, remembering Julia's words that William should not take her word for it. What are you going to do? Julia asked. Think it over. And God forbid that William should find out that you know about his nefarious plans. Thank you, Julia. I really appreciate the warning. Don't worry, no one will find out, Molly assured the girl. All day long, she couldn't find a place to be. She was overcome with despair and fear. The last hopes that Alex will be able to justify collapsed. Moreover, the imaginary friend William turned out to be worse than the enemy. After all, you know the enemy by sight, and the friend, masquerading as a decent man, stabs in the back. The most unexpected moment, Molly come into the office called William. As soon as Molly arrived home, really wanted to get in the face of this private person. But pulling herself together, the girl smiled welcomingly and followed him. Victor said you were ready. There is no time to lose. The information should come to us as soon as possible. The man said, puzzled. I'm ready to go, the girl assured him. The only thing is, I hate to ask, but I have almost no money left. Found a problem, laughed the man. Of course, I will give money for your business trip. You can go tomorrow morning. You probably don't understand, do you? I need a lot of money, nonchalantly said the girl. Why? William smirked. I think that Igor will have to be paid well for this kind of information. Why would he tell me everything? There must be some interest. I see. So you're right. I'll give you the necessary amount. In the morning, Molly quietly said goodbye to Julia. She realized she was never coming back to this house and was unlikely to see William's wife again. Good luck to you. Be discreet and careful, the woman whispered. Thank you, thanked Molly. Arriving at the bus station, the girl sat down on a bench. She didn't know what to do next. This town had to go. William was not to be trifled with, and she should not try her luck. At the same time, she thought feverishly about how to help Alex. Seeing a crumpled leaf with Svetlana's phone number, she decided to talk to her. Realizing that she urgently needed someone to consult with, she dialed the number of the good-natured woman. Hello, Jenna. Do you recognize me? Of course I recognize you, Jenna said. I often think of you. I'd like to talk to you, Molly said bluntly without trouble, writing down the address. Half an hour later, Molly was sitting in the cozy kitchen, drinking tea. Yes, it's getting worse by the hour, Jenna said. I always suspected that our William was a short man. Well, to what extent? Are you very lucky to have found out what he's planning? You're right, but I don't know what to do next. I extorted some money out of him. I wanted to hire a good lawyer for Alex. But where do I find one? Well, that's no problem at all. Did you come to the right place? The woman's happy. My son is a lawyer. True, he only recently received his diploma. But I assure you, he's no worse than expensive lawyers. John is too honest and fair. He won't rest until he gets to the truth. Especially through him, you'll be able to communicate with Alex. Maybe he can tell you how to help him. Great. Molly was happy. And your Vanny will agree to take a rather hopeless case. Of course. Where will he go? Jenna winked. I'll call him right away to come over to my place. You stay with me for a couple days. I need to think things over. Molly breathed a sigh of relief. She had hoped that things weren't so bad in this case. Maybe they could find a way out of the situation together. John listened carefully to the girl's story about Alex's misfortunes. What do you think, son? Asked Jenna after a long pause. Nothing encouraging so far. It's all very confusing. Plus, the escape has made things very aggravating, the boy explained. But I'll try to do my best. Do your best, son. You see, these bandits have lost all shame, said the woman. Yes, they have. Do you work for them? How many times have I asked you to leave this bar? John said reproachfully. I work in the kitchen. What difference does it make who Jenna objected to? William pays well and without delay. And especially now it's not about me. Suit yourself, Molly's boyfriend waved his hand. I will deal with your question tomorrow. As soon as there is news, I will call you. Thank you, thanked the girl. The next day, John came with the first news. The guy managed to see Alex. He asked me to tell you that he loves you very much. The guy smiled. Also asked that you not to worry. How did he cry? Molly is holding up very well. I have no intention of giving up. I had to tell him about William. He should know his enemy by sight, and we've decided to appeal. But in order to do that, we need to find some proof that he's not involved in the crime he was convicted of. John explained. How do we find it? Robert will never admit to anything in his life, Molly said. William asked you to find out about a large trucking shipment. Why would he do that? Why do you think? I think Robert's being set up or robbed. It's a situation that could play into our hands in a way Molly hasn't realized. I think Robert would be interested to know that gangsters are interested in his shipment, and he'll certainly want to know who. Tell me, what kind of man is Robert? You can talk to him. At first glance, he seems like a nice guy. Yes, you can have serious conversations with him about his business. Robert is reasonable, not violent. Often listens to outside opinions. Then I don't understand. Why did you have to run away from him? I imagined him to be a monster, the guy wondered. As a manager and businessman, he is a normal man. But in his personal life, he's not quite normal. Robert is a pervert. I didn't believe the rumors that were going around about him. I had to see for myself, the girl explained. I barely got away from him. Well done. John's come alive, son. What's so great about it? Jenna intervened. Don't scare us. I don't mean that. The kid laughed. Molly, we might find some evidence of his addiction. I don't know. I heard he's been married twice, and I think both spouses are in a psychiatric hospital. That's great. John was happy. As far as I know, he used to live and work in our town. Yeah, he had to sell up and flee the capital after the story that got Alex locked up. Molly, if I managed to get some dirt on Robert, would you be willing to meet him for a talk? Naturally, John asked in my presence. If it's with you, I'm ready. Is there anything I can do to help right now? Yes. We need to talk to his ex-wives. Find them as soon as possible. I'm seeing a classmate of mine right now. He's an investigator. I think he can help us in a few days. Molly and Vanya were on their way to Robert Ailes. They managed to get some compromising information against him. Robert was very protective of his reputation and had to agree to Molly's terms. Are you afraid? Asked John. You don't have a face on you. I'm afraid, honestly, admitted the girl. I have very bad memories of this city. First, I lost my parents here. Then there were years of abuse from my aunt. And then it got worse. Don't be afraid, I won't leave you. Sashka said I'm in charge of you. I was joking. Getting out of the cab, Molly and Vanya went to Robert's office. The secretary was very surprised to see Molly in the company of a young man. Jenka, whispered the girl, what are you doing here? Where have you been? Robert's been looking all over town for you. Even went to the police. What about yourself? Molly nodded at the door. Just got here. I say don't. We want to surprise you. Molly smirked. Robert was sitting at his desk, going through some documentation. The man was obviously puzzled about something and did not immediately see Molly and John. Hello, Robert, Molly said loudly, trying to hide her fear. The man took off his glasses and literally jumped up in his chair. It was visible to the naked eye how he was shaken with anger. John said calmly, You'd better sit down and don't make any sudden movements. Who are you? Robert, Molly's lawyer, bellowed. My name is John. The guy introduced himself. What do you want? The man didn't understand. If you want to take something from me, you can't. Is our marriage annulled? No, said John. We're having a more serious conversation. Listen to this. You'll find out. John turned on the tape recorder. For several years of my life, Robert has made my existence a living hell. There was a shaky female voice on the tape. Turn it off. Robert roared. Great. Did you recognize one of your wives, Lydia? There's also a recording of a conversation with Katerina. Turn it on, smiled John, realizing he'd hit the sore spot. No need for a detached voice, said Robert. How much do you want? We don't need money, said Molly. Maybe you remember that Alex kid you set up and put behind bars? Then he sold everything and fled to our town. How do you know about that? Stunned man. It doesn't matter. Alex should be released, Molly said decisively. Only now she realized that she was no longer afraid of this low, cowardly man. Earlier he had seemed powerful and omnipotent, but now he looked like a hunted hare. How am I going to free Alex? You should at least think about what you're saying sometimes. Robert tried hard to pretend he didn't know what he was talking about. Robert, we have something else besides the testimony of your ex-wives. We can be your enemies as well as your friends. I advise you not to be sarcastic, but to use this situation to your advantage, said John. What are you talking about? What kind of riddles? The man got nervous. There are people who are very interested in your firm. They insistently want to know information about the large shipment you are sending in 2 weeks, said Molly. Moreover, they are ready to pay a lot of money for this information. Who are these people? Robert asked fearfully. Now you realize that we are worth being friends with, Molly asked. How do you know that? The man didn't understand. Never mind, said John. Hurry up and think. Unfortunately, we don't have any time for idle talk. Robert thought feverishly about what he should do. He realized that he should agree to Molly's terms. The man had long suspected that his firm was being hunted, but he'd never been able to find out who. Okay, you tell me everything. I verify the information and help. Alex agreed. No, this is not the way to solve cases, said John. First you help Alex, and then you know the necessary information and the recorder. I advise you not to delay. Time does not stand still. We have no reason to deceive you. But you realize that in any case, Alex will not be released for 2 weeks. We understand. When we see that the process is underway, then we'll tell you everything we know, John said. Good. I'll look into the matter today, the man promised. Leave your phone number. I will contact you as soon as there is news, said the lawyer. We will wait, said Molly, rising from the chair. The young men left the office, leaving Robert in thought. Molly was very grateful to John for his help and support. She realized that she would hardly have influenced Robert on her own. What do you think? He won't cheat us, Molly asked the lawyer. Even if he wanted to, he couldn't. There's supposed to be a new development in Alexandra's case. I'm his lawyer, and I'll be the first to know. What am I supposed to do now? Molly asked. You need to lay low somewhere. You don't want to go to my mother's. It's not safe. You should stay here. We'll get an apartment for you for a couple weeks. Then we'll see. I think a lot of things will be worked out in that time. Call William, tell him everything's going according to plan. We need to put his guard down. Just passed. Don't go anywhere until I get there. Time dragged on for an agonizingly long time for Molly. The girl sat in the rented apartment, waiting for news from John. The guy called her every day, telling her how things were going. Each time she waited for long-awaited news from the lawyer. Now Molly was between two fires. She was afraid of William's revenge. After all, such people do not forgive betrayal. What do you want? The man didn't understand. If you want to take something from me, you can't. Is our marriage annulled? No, said John. We're having a more serious conversation. Listen to this. You'll find out. John turned on the tape recorder. For several years of my life, Robert has made my existence a living hell. There was a shaky female voice on the tape. Turn it off. Robert roared. Great. Did you recognize one of your wives, Lucy? There's also a recording of a conversation with Katerina. Turn it on, smiled John, realizing he'd hit the sore spot. No need for a detached voice, said Robert. How much do you want? We don't need money, said Molly. Maybe you remember that Alex kid you set up and put behind bars? Then he sold everything and fled to our town. How do you know about that? Stunned man. It doesn't matter. Alex should be released, Molly said decisively. Only now she realized that she was no longer afraid of this low, cowardly man. Earlier he had seemed powerful and omnipotent, but now he looked like a hunted hare. How am I going to free Alex? You should at least think about what you're saying sometimes. Robert tried hard to pretend he didn't know what he was talking about. Robert, we have something else besides the testimony of your ex-wives. We can be your enemies as well as your friends. I advise you not to be sarcastic, but to use this situation to your advantage, said John. What are you talking about? What kind of riddles? The man got nervous. There are people who are very interested in your firm. They insistently want to know information about the large shipment you are sending in 2 weeks, said Molly. Moreover, they are ready to pay a lot of money for this information. Who are these people? Robert asked fearfully. Now you realize that we are worth being friends with, Molly asked. How do you know that? The man didn't understand. Never mind, said John. Hurry up and think. Unfortunately, we don't have any time for idle talk. Robert thought feverishly about what he should do. He realized that he should agree to Molly's terms. The man had long suspected that his firm was being hunted, but he'd never been able to find out who. Okay, you tell me everything. I verify the information and help. Alex agreed. No, this is not the way to solve cases, said John. First you help Alex, and then you know the necessary information and the recorder. I advise you not to delay. Time does not stand still. We have no reason to deceive you. But you realize that in any case, Alex will not be released for 2 weeks. We understand. When we see that the process is underway, then we'll tell you everything we know, John said. Good. I'll look into the matter today, the man promised. Leave your phone number. I will contact you as soon as there is news, said the lawyer. We will wait, said Molly, rising from the chair. The young men left the office, leaving Robert in thought. Molly was very grateful to John for his help and support. She realized that she would hardly have influenced Robert on her own. What do you think? He won't cheat us, Molly asked the lawyer. Even if he wanted to, he couldn't. There's supposed to be a new development in Alexandra's case. I'm his lawyer, and I'll be the first to know. What am I supposed to do now? Molly asked. You need to lay low somewhere. You don't want to go to my mother's. It's not safe. You should stay here. We'll get an apartment for you for a couple weeks. Then we'll see. I think a lot of things will be worked out in that time. Call William. Tell him everything's going according to plan. We need to put his guard down. Just passed. Don't go anywhere until I get there. Time dragged on for an agonizingly long time for Molly. The girl sat in the rented apartment, waiting for news from John. The guy called her every day, telling her how things were going. Each time she waited for long-awaited news from the lawyer. Now Molly was between 2 fires. She was afraid of William's revenge. After all, such people do not forgive betrayal. I'm going to my place, John said into the phone. Robert called yesterday. After his call, I checked the information. Anyway, the ice had broken. Molly rejoiced at the good news and prayed to God that everything would go well. The girl couldn't sit still. Walked around the apartment here and there. Looking out the window, seeing in the courtyard of the lawyer's car, rushed to open the door. Well? Impatiently asked the girl, seeing John on the doorstep. Everything is fine. The resumption of proceedings on newly discovered circumstances. The guy smiled. Robert kept his word. Pack up, he's waiting for us. I still don't understand how he did it. And I think he admitted his involvement in the crime, the girl pondered. No, of course, I won't go into details. But I can say with certainty that the testimony and evidence that provided your ex-husband is enough to justify Alex. Now there's another problem. What is it? Molly asked fearfully. William, I have some thoughts. I need to talk to Robert. I think he'll like my proposal. That way, we can neutralize William. Robert was waiting in Molly's office with his lawyer. When he saw the young men, he was overjoyed. So they were not deceived. Robert sighed with relief. I explained at the first meeting that we are serious people and are more your friends than your enemies, smiled John. I'm going to have a very serious conversation with you. Yes, the man said, inviting those present to sit down. Tell me, you don't hold a grudge against Molly, do you? The boy asked bluntly. Logically speaking, she's saving your firm. No, I don't. The man glanced at Molly and immediately shifted his gaze. You see, I'm in grave danger right now. You must help her avoid the retribution of these people. Yes, of course. I will do everything in my power, the man assured. Now we will tell you who is interested in your cargo. By the way, if it's no secret that you were going to bring anything illegal, I'm just asking out of curiosity. I was supposed to be moving a very large shipment of valuable metals. The deal was completely classified. I still can't figure out who could have sold us out. Frankly, if it wasn't for you, a lot of innocent people would have died. And my firm and my reputation would have been completely ruined, and I would have given up the deal until the traitor was identified. I don't do that kind of business. And how many people knew about the deal? John asked. I am my assistant and the customer. In my opinion, the circle of suspects has been narrowed down to one. The lawyer smirked. Yes, but I need to check him out somehow. I've always trusted Igor, and I still doubt his guilt. Here I propose to check your assistant, and at the same time to punish those people who wanted to take possession of your cargo. How to do it? Robert asked quietly. You have good connections in the police, don't you? Well, yes, I'm going to tell you the plan I've come up with. If you agree, we will punish your enemies and get rid of them at the same time. Thus helping Molly to avoid the vengeance of these people, said the boy. Yes, I agree with certainty, said Robert. Well, I like your plan, don't you? It's very clever. I can feel it right away, said Robert. I certainly never would have guessed that William was playing a double game. A low, sneaky man. We've known each other for years. I've done a lot for him in my time. And as it turns out, I've been making an enemy. So here's the deal. You're announcing to your assistant today that you're changing the transportation route. And I'm asking my comrade to help us in exposing the criminal group, said John. What am I supposed to do? Molly asked. You will now call William. Tell him that you got all the necessary information. But there are still some details to be clarified. We need to know if you will be informed about the change of route, the lawyer explained. An hour later, Molly and John were sitting in a cozy cafe. Molly looked sad. I remembered how they had recently been in a similar place with Alex, eating ice cream, making plans for the future. At the time, none of them could have guessed that the man who was the only one who could help the boy would turn out to be a despicable traitor. Molly thought about how lucky she was to have met such a wonderful man as John. If not for him, there was no telling how her fate would have turned out. John, I'm very grateful for your help. Tell me, do you have a personal score to settle with William? Vidyet is taking a big risk by helping me and Alex. William doesn't forgive such behavior. You know, I was going to leave this conversation for later. But if you brought it up, I'll tell you now, Molly, I like you very much. Just don't say anything. First, after hearing me out, John said, seeing the protest in the girl's eyes. Anyway, we'll get Alex out, but think about whether you need him. I realize that you met him at a difficult time in your life. You probably thought it was love, but it's more likely that you felt the protection and strength that came from Alex. John, there's no need to go on. This is an empty conversation. What can it give you? The lawyer got angry. He has absolutely nothing. No home, no family, no education. It's just him and that's it. What's waiting for you next to Alex? A miserable, miserable existence. You'll get bored of that kind of life very quickly. I, unlike him, can give you everything you deserve. I'm just at the beginning of my career. It won't be long before I'm on my feet, a successful man. Let's not ruin our friendship and never revisit this conversation again. I love Alex, and I don't care if he has something or not. The only thing I want is to always be by his side. Molly said confidently. Well, I wish you hadn't heard me, the boy frowned. You're not going to help us anymore. The girl asked bluntly. I'll finish what I started. I'm a professional, and I don't confuse personal relationships with work. The boy was silent and turned away from the window. It was obvious that his mood had soured and his enthusiasm had diminished. Molly was afraid that John would not keep his word and would start to put sticks in the wheels on purpose. After all, at the moment their fate with Alex was in the hands of this man. But she had to trust the lawyer because she couldn't do anything without his help. "No drive-through, take you home. Or will you sit in the cafe for a while?" asked John. "Take me, if it's not too much trouble. I don't want to stay here alone." Near the entrance, John said goodbye to the girl, gave instructions, and promised that he would be in touch. "If everything goes according to our plan, William will be arrested in a week. You will be able to live in peace, waiting for Alexa's release." The boy said sadly, "John, thank you. We would never have gotten out of this without your help." Molly thanked him sincerely. "Are you afraid I've figured it out in days?" "John, don't think about it. I've never been a mean person." Molly calmed down a bit. After this conversation, John appeared to be a man of honesty and fairness. She hoped that her intuition would not fail her and everything would be fine. The girl called William in the morning and told him that she had learned a lot of things. There were still some details to be clarified. The plan was for her to call him back in the evening. Until then, Robert would inform his assistant about the change of route. And if he was the traitor, William would know about the change. "William, I'm sorry to bother you," the girl said into the receiver. "I wanted to ask about Alex if there is any news." "How good of you to call. I received information that the transportation route has been changed." "Do you know anything about it?" quickly asked William. The man was visibly nervous, almost shouting into the phone. "I don't know anything yet." Masterfully lied Molly. "Don't worry. I'll meet my man in the morning and find out everything. I'm expecting the call right away." William bellowed, hanging up the phone. Molly hung up the phone and smirked. John was right. Apparently, the traitor at Robert's firm is his assistant David. He knows all the routes, and William didn't have that information. That's pretty weird. The girl was in a state of shock. During this short period of time, she realized that close friends are the most betrayed, the people we trust the most. The girl decided to call Robert to share her thoughts. He knew his employees better than she did. Maybe the traitor was someone else after all. Someone who didn't have access to all the information. Especially if David was working for William, he wouldn't have had to send Molly here. Cell phone rings. "Hello. Don't get distracted?" the girl asked, dialing Robert's number. "No, I'm all worked up. Is something wrong?" The man asked quickly. "I've been thinking. Something's not right with me." "What kind of things?" Robert asked. "William knows about the change of route. He's very excited and wants the information as soon as possible." "Tell me, does Igor know the new route?" "Yes, he made it up himself. I gave him the maps on purpose to keep him informed." "David here knows the layout of the new route, but William doesn't." "How is that possible?" Molly asked. "I see what you mean." "Then who?" "It was a secret shipment. No one knew about it except me and my assistant." Robert was confused. "Thank you, Molly, for sharing your thoughts. I'm gonna call John. I wonder what he'll say about it." Robert immediately dialed the lawyer. John also realized that it was unlikely that Igor had done this. "Robert, how long ago did you check the office for a bug?" John asked. "I never did. I didn't need to." The man was confused. "That's not good. Get on it tomorrow morning. Something tells me you're being listened to." "How else do you explain William knowing about your secret transportation, but not knowing the details?" "Thank you. I'll call you as soon as I hear anything," Robert promised. John was right. The very next day, a wire was found in Robert's office. The man went outside to call his lawyer. The guy said to leave it alone and not to spread the word to the staff about the find. That evening, Molly called William. "I found out everything." "I got a new itinerary." "That's great. When are you coming?" asked the man. "I'll email the paperwork. I'll be there a little later. I want to visit my aunt in a few days." The girl lied. "Okay, I'll be waiting." It was time for the special operation. Molly was very worried. She feared that William would not be caught red-handed. If that happened, she wouldn't be able to get away. William is not Robert, and you can't escape him that easily. Don't be afraid of anything. Trying to reassure John, Just sit tight and wait for my call. I thought, what if William won't do it on his own? No way. He's too greedy to trust anyone with such a big job. Greed will get him killed. Time literally stopped for Molly. Tired of waiting for the cherished call from John, the girl began to pray for time. Everything should have ended long ago, but the phone was stubbornly silent. Unable to stand it, Molly decided to call herself. Yes, John said calmly. Did something go wrong? Molly asked. Why aren't you calling? I'm fine. I forgot to call. William's been arrested, and with him his whole company. The guy said without emotion. I'm sorry, I'm really tired. If there's any news about Alex, I'll call you right away. Molly hung up the phone and sighed with relief. It's okay. William had been arrested. But for some reason she felt very uneasy. John had changed beyond recognition. She knew he resented her for refusing him. But she had never promised him anything. She loves Alex and is not going to betray her love by exchanging it for material goods. Molly spent a few days all alone. She had nowhere to go, and she did not want to communicate with anyone. The girl patiently waited for any news and set him free. Robert, we're being honest here. I know who the real culprit is. So an innocent man gets hurt again. The girl asked me bluntly. But how can I tell you? There's a man who owes me a very large sum of money. He will never be able to pay me back. I suggested that he redeem his debt in this way. Anyway, it's easier for him to do a few years than to live in constant fear. I didn't press him, and he gladly accepted my offer. Well, that's probably the best option. Thanks anyway. You don't hold a grudge against John. He's lost his head in love, and I understand him very well. I mean, I was once willing to do anything stupid for you. It's a pity my former vices prevented me from knowing happiness with you. You're a very beautiful woman. Frankly, I don't envy Alex. The guy's lucky in some ways. Molly went outside and decided to walk to her rented apartment. She was overwhelmed with double feelings and thoughts. She didn't know if Robert would keep his word or betray her like everyone else she had encountered lately. Robert was her last hope. Was there no one else to help? Everyone had turned their backs on them, leaving them alone with their problems. Molly put the cup of coffee on the table and walked to the window. The first snow had fallen today. The girl was glad to see large-shaped snowflakes that did not fall down, beautifully covering the ground with a white blanket. Hearing the phone ringing, she ran to her room. Only Robert could call her. John had never made himself known. No one else knew her number. Hello, Robert, the girl said cheerfully. Any news, how do you say? Yes and no. Anyway, this is not a telephone conversation. You tell me your address. I'll stop by for a couple minutes. Why don't I go to the office? Molly was worried. Although Robert gave the impression of an adequate person, but still the girl knew him from the other side. That's why I was afraid. And I certainly didn't want to be alone with him. Don't be afraid, Robert said. I won't even go into the apartment if you want me to. Just give me the address. Molly dictated the address and went to the kitchen to put the kettle on. The doorbell rang just 10 minutes later. Hi, Robert smiled. What's my surprise? I don't understand, Molly. Come into the kitchen. It's very stuffy in here. I made tea. Wait, you and your tea, laughed the man. Look over here. Molly looked out into the corridor and froze, not believing her own eyes. Alex was standing near the door against the wall. The guy clutched a large bouquet of scarlet roses in his hands and smiled silently. Sashka, Molly shouted, throwing herself on the neck of her favorite person. Why didn't you warn me? I would have cooked dinner. We wanted to make a surprise, especially if we had everything with us. Robert nodded at the weighty bag of groceries. Molly, Alex, and Robert sat at the table. The girl couldn't look at the guy. She still couldn't believe her happiness. Robert wanted to leave right away, but Molly insisted that he stay for lunch. I never thought I'd be sitting at the same table with you, Alex said, looking at Robert. It's not for nothing they say that sometimes friends become enemies and enemies become friends. Don't be afraid of enemies, be afraid of friends philosophically, said Robert. I am guilty before you, before Molly. I didn't think Molly would be so helpful either. By the way, your lawyer didn't go anywhere. He just changed his phone number. That's what a shallow person does. He seemed very serious and fair at first. God help him, the judge said Molly. Alex is free. That's the main thing. What are you going to do next? Robert asked. To live, smiled Molly. That's right. I can offer you a job. Would you like to go? Asked Robert. No, said Alex firmly. We'll start our lives all over again, from scratch, so to speak. We'll probably go somewhere else. As you asked Molly, with you ready to go anywhere? Seriously, said the girl. Well, I approve of your choice. Robert opened the briefcase, took out a neatly folded package and placed it on the table. What is it? It's for a new life. The man smiled. I sincerely wish you happiness. You deserve it. Robert said goodbye to the young people and left for work. Molly unwrapped the roll-up and whistled in surprise. Such a sum of money she had never seen. Oh, Alex was surprised. It's paid off in full. Any idea? The guy smiled. What? Remember that forest where we met? Asked Alex. Of course, I have the happiest memories with this place. Maybe you noticed at the entrance from the forest behind the monastery stands a big term. I remember a 2-story carved house, very beautiful. There was an ad for sale at the gate. I thought it was unlikely anyone would want to buy a palace like that in the middle of nowhere. Wait, where are you going with this? Molly smiled. Let's buy this house. It's so beautiful. It's quiet. And the air? I'll finally get to do what I love to do. I'll open a woodcarving shop. Alex's eyes sparkled, like a little kid who finally got what he's been dreaming of all his life. Super. I think there is no better place to live, said the happy girl. That's great. So tomorrow morning we go to a new life, said the guy, hugging Molly. Molly felt peace and bliss for the first time in her life. She felt warm and cozy around this manly man. She knew he would never betray her. She believed that they had a happy future ahead of them and a peaceful life, away from the hustle and bustle, intrigue and betrayal.